Good evening. Tonight is a special meeting to discuss the school resource officer of the Concord School Board. Tonight is March the 3rd, 2021. To start off, I would like to ask Ms. Cannon if she would call the roll, please.
Ms. Higgins.
Here.
Ms. Smith.
Here.
Mr. Parker.
Here.
Ms. West.
Here.
Mr. Weinberg.
Here. Here.
Ms. Walsh.
Here.
Ms. Hastings.
Here.
Mr. Richards.
Here.
I am here. All 9 of us are present.
Very good. Is Ms. Smith remote or?
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry. Yep, she's around.
Yes. So Ms. Smith is joining us remotely today. I do not anticipate that we will be taking any votes this evening. However, this is a meeting that the board requested during one of our budget sessions to have a presentation and information provided by the school administration and to listen to public input as a public hearing part of this meeting. Prior to making our budgetary decisions, we need to post a budget, a tentative budget, on March the 8th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Dunn. And then we will be finalizing our FY22 budget on March the 31st. So that is the only thing on the agenda this evening. So with that, Superintendent Murphy, would you like to start off?
Good evening, Mr. Richards. Thank you. I'm going to go right to a presentation that has been put together by our high school staff, but I do want to let you know that present tonight with you is Michael Reardon, principal at Concord High School, Tim Herbert, assistant principal at Concord High School, Donna Pally, our assistant superintendent of schools, Jack Dunn, our business administrator, and I was looking to see that our principal from Runlet is with us also tonight, so I think that covers everyone. So we would like to start then, if that's okay with you. I'm going to ask Tim and Mike to start us off.
Good evening, everyone. So what we're going to try to do is to give you a factual account of what the position looks like on a day-to-day basis at Concord High School, what the SRO does, the services he provides, the focuses he has, the training that goes into his ability to do that type of a job. I want to acknowledge at the outset that I understand that this is a fraught topic in this community, and we've endeavored to be as factual and forthright as we can in our presentation of these facts. I'm going to ask, in a minute, I'm going to ask my assistant principal, Dr. Tim Herbert, who knows about 100 times more than I do about any topic you could think of, to walk you through most of these slides. I want to do the first one myself. Before I do that, the point I want to make here is that for us at the high school, focusing on the phrase, school resource officer, the balance lies in the resource. As Tim will describe in a minute, this is a position that fits into multiple other positions of resource and support for our students. And each one of those components has specific strengths that position brings to the support of our kids, not dissimilarly to what we do in terms of academics with things like Second Start or Diploma Academy or flex classes at the high school. One of the strengths is still a relative outsider to this district that I noticed from the first day is the multiplicity of supports that we have for our kids. And this school resource officer, I think, fits very well into that. The other term that I would emphasize is the school, and that these officers don't, at least in Concord, appear out of nowhere. They apply for the position. They go through a winnowing process of interviews, and they're trained for the position. And I think that's a very important thing to understand as Tim walks you through what the position looks like on a day-to-day basis, because not surprisingly, I think a lot of people have a certain image of what a police officer would do in any setting, and that's very different for a school resource officer from what an officer is doing on the outside in a non-school venue. So we have in this first slide, the vision is that for all Concord students, they'll develop a passion for learning, they'll experience excellence in their lives, and perhaps most importantly, believe that they have the ability to shape the future of their lives and the future of their communities. And we have in this first slide a distinction between some of the partners that help us achieve those goals. You know, at the risk of a cliche, it does take a village to reach the goals that are talked about in that vision. So we have educational partners, as you can see there, and we have mental health and well-being partners. And all of them play a vital and distinct role in helping kids succeed. At the bottom is a definition that we want to go by tonight for what a school resource officer does, at least at Concord High School. And that's first and foremost to act as a first line of defense in maintaining student and staff well-being, and to form positive relationships and guide students in making healthy choices. I think you see that in a lot of the different organizations and support people that you'll hear about tonight. So with that, Tim, you want to?
Thank you, Jack. We'll go to the next slide. So Concord High School and our inclusive mission, as Mike mentioned, it takes a village, it takes a community. This is a slide. We have a multi-tiered system of supports at Concord High School, and I was informed that the board was given a presentation on that by Assistant Superintendent Donna Pally, I believe, last week. Here are some of the pillars within our multi-tiered support system that SRO is a cog, so to speak, in each of these systems, from our restorative justice, social emotional learning, student safety, school safety and security, and what we've come to call crimson culture, the soft skills, civil skills that we want students to develop in their time here, in their 4 years at Concord High School, and bring back into our community. At the bottom of this graphic, you see community partner kind of categories that we partner with on a regular basis when working with our students, and that 360 approach to go beyond just academic needs, the social emotional needs, the personal needs that they take and need to have met when they enter our building. And those partners include caregivers, other educational organizations, juvenile justice services, mental health organizations, child welfare, primary care, are also, members of that community that it takes to surround these students with a 360 approach. And we see in Concord, in this multi-tiered system, in order to truly support the student in the holistic development here in an inclusive environment, we need these community partnerships. And the SRO is one of those community partners. Next slide. Thank you, Jack. So how does the SRO fit into this MTSS model? We need the community approach. His primary focus, and I say his because currently we have a male SRO, but it could be his or her primary focus, student and staff safety. In order to learn and feel comfortable in this school, you have to feel safe. Truly believe that to every fiber in our institution. We believe that. The SRO is part of ensuring that safety day in and day out. He acts as a current SRO, acts as a liaison to the school district and Concord Police. Reports, we're required by law for Safe Schools Act, RSA 193D, to report acts of violence, theft, our drug-related acts to the police. He acts as our intake for those reports and ensures that they're documented appropriately. It relieves the district of a liability if we fail to report that we're out of compliance with that law. He offers educational programs. The SROs in the SRO here in Concord and SROs in other districts receive specialized training for working with adolescents and schools. They're here primarily to build relationships in our community and to make our community a better place. The SRO does not, and I want to emphasize, does not in any way, shape, or form act as Concord High School's personal police department. They are not the law and order of Concord High School. They do not handle school discipline. That is 100% handled by assistant principals, working in conjunction with teachers, counselors, and other support staff to make sure we're taking that 360 approach to students' needs. They do not suspend students and is not involved in the decision to suspend students. And they are not used in any way, shape, or form for classroom management or assigned routine supervisory duties. Not to say that you may walk into the cafeteria and see an SRO in the cafeteria talking to our students. That's not because he's assigned there. That's because he's building relationships with our students. Next slide, please. Thank you. Just an example of one of the activities that an SRO takes on here at Concord High School, and that 360 approach, again, of the student well-being, student academic, meeting all student needs. SROs are part of interdisciplinary teams that provide multifaceted supports for students and families. An example of this is our youth roundtable. We meet as a group monthly, sometimes bi-weekly is probably a better way of describing our schedule. It's together a group of administrators, counselors, educators, school psychologists, Riverbend caseworkers when necessary, DCYF counselors when necessary. We bring in juvenile justice services when appropriate. Social workers as well are involved in this discussion. And what we do is we look at some of our most neediest students who are not being successful at Concord High School, who are not being successful in the community, and we come together as a community to support them. The SRO is our liaison between many of these agencies and organizes this on again, I said monthly, but it's more of a bi-weekly basis. And we come out of this with action plans to support these students and ensure that they'll be successful at Concord High School. And part of this goes back to our inclusive nature. It's not a elite club here. We are going to service all our students and their needs. Next slide. School safety and security. Day in and day out, he is the front line of our school safety and security. Right off the bat, having the SRO in the building greatly reduces the emergency response time. I've experienced this with students who become ill and gone non-responsive in classrooms. In seconds, not minutes, seconds, a uniformed SRO in the classroom with the AED on the radio, dispatching medical assistance, and within minutes, not tens of minutes, single minutes, we have EMTs, etc., arriving in our building, and the students are being provided medical attention necessary, and they're transported up to the hospital, etc. Now, can we do that with a school nurse? Can we do that with our administrative team? Can we do that with our teachers and staff here? We're a pretty wonderful staff, and we can be pretty responsive, and I have no doubt we can handle emergency situations. It's the response time. When it's a life or death situation, minutes matter, and the response time in these situations are seconds, not minutes. In addition to that, maintaining the safely orderly operation of the building. Every day, part of the SRO routine is an external and internal inspection of our building. The doors, windows, access points, walking the halls to meet every staff member, new member of our ed assistant staff, to get to know the faces of the community at Concord High School. Get to know the new substitute teachers, the monitors we have assisting us now as we go through our hybrid woes. makes a point to do that. Why? Because in the situation of what we hope never happens, inevitable thoughts, he needs to know who's in this community, and he needs to have relationships with them. He needs to know individuals and the supports they need, whether adult, student, etc., in this building, and he's there to be a part of our, what's the word I'm looking for, though? Thank you. He is the front line of our response team in these situations. In addition to that, he serves as a member of our school safety and security team. I will refrain from saying chair because I think that's Mr. Reardon's position. However, he does everything a chair would do. He reviews our drills. He brings in outside professionals to critique us as we practice our drills, give us feedback, and refine them based on best practices. Some of those drills, I just listed a few up there. Some of you may be familiar with them: evacuations, leaving the building, reunifications after a catastrophic event. How do we account for the students, staff that were in this building, and make sure they get reunified with their loved ones? Lockdown procedures, fire drills, and solo officer rapid deployment, which is in the case of unthinkable. How does a single officer manage a very difficult situation?
Tim, maybe mention the importance of knowing his way around the building.
Going right back to the substantial decrease in emergency response time, having an officer that knows the room numbers, the numbers of the windows, the entrances, the numbers on the doors that you use to enter this building, I should say letters, is invaluable. He can maneuver from one end of the building to the other again in seconds, and it's a 535,000 square foot building, easy for someone who's not familiar to get lost. In addition to this, some of the training he brings with him is de-escalation training to assist school personnel when necessary. This de-escalation is not, I've seen it more often than not, it's not necessarily with a student. We've had people who've come on our property who do not belong here during the day, adults from our community, but not our school community, and they need to leave. And when Tim Herbert, assistant principal, walks up to them, who the heck are you? Well, an SRO is trained in, well, all officers are trained in de-escalation and assisting in these situations that do occur here at Concord High School. In addition to that, we have situations where visitors do come into this building, and unfortunately, in some circumstances, things get disorderly, and we need somebody besides, again, Tim Herbert, assistant principal, to assist with that. And he has, in our case right now, we have a male SRO. He is trained in this, and as are many officers. The additional training he receives as an SRO, though, is working with individuals with disabilities, specifically autistic youth. In addition to that, working with students who have experienced ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma, and the SROs are trained to be trauma-informed when approaching these situations. And finally, the most important probably part of the school safety and security, coming right back to relationships, is interacting with students, families, and staff, forming those supportive relationships. It's the best preventative means to ensure that we never have to worry about the unthinkable. Next slide. I mentioned specialized training. Some of the youth trainings that an SRO goes through, an example, a mirror project. This is where an SRO meets with an adolescent youth who's had some interaction with the law enforcement, and they switch roles. The SRO is the youth, and the youth gets to respond to the SRO, or in the role of the officer, and they go through a script, and they share their experiences, and they have dialogue on how that child felt when they were approached by law enforcement. The officer gets to be treated the way the child felt they were treated in that moment, and in return, the student treats the officer the way, the student treats the officer the way the student felt treated in that moment. The officer gets to try and respond, and the student can respond the same way, or I say the student, but the adolescent gets to respond the same way they were responded to when they went through their situation. It's to develop empathy and understanding. So when an SRO is interacting and working with an adolescent who's going through a deep, troubled experience, that they can take a moment, pause, and say there's more to this story than just some student breaking rules and being loud or doing this at Concord High School. There's more to it than that. And taking the time to get to figure out what the need that the child in that moment has and trying to address that. I mentioned earlier trauma-informed de-escalation training. They do, SROs go through training on effective youth interaction, and particularly they do a number of trainings around working with students with disabilities. One that was brought up, one of the more recent ones that the current SRO went through was working with autistic youth. In addition, the SRO with RSA 193D, Safe Schools Act, and our CHS/Concord Police Department Memorandum of Understanding. The SRO is our liaison to the Concord PD and accepts the mandatory reportings that we have to do per these acts and per our Memorandum of Understanding. So every time Tim Herbert has an infraction where it involves drugs, weapons, violence, theft of above $50, or destruction of property above $50, I'm required to make a report to the local PD. If I fail to make that report, I'm liable. School district's liable. With an SRO on site, my just going to the SRO and sharing this information of the incident constitutes the school district making that report. If the SRO is not on site, we would call dispatch. We'd wait for the next available patrol officer to arrive. Now, when you're talking about violent situation, we do have fights break out at Concord High School. We do have individuals, students within our community who may be struggling, having a difficult time. If we don't have an SRO, we would call dispatch. Dispatch will send, again, the next available patrol officer. Is that patrol officer going to have the relationship with the student that they're about to encounter? Is that patrol officer going to know the staff member who they may need to assist in that situation? In some cases, possibly, but probably not as well as a member in our building every day would. Next slide. The school resource officer and student learning, beyond the day-to-day safety and student and staff safety and security of the building, the SRO is part of an educational institution. And with that being said, they bring components of education to Concord High School that enrich the students' experience here, to include an age-appropriate motor vehicle safety programs, substance use education, discussions around healthy adolescent relationships, and in addition to that, SROs have historically served as guest speakers in courses such as career and communication, street law, and criminal justice. So just this next slide, one, just to give you a little bit of CHS data, and then two, kind of give a prelude into the next slide, or an introduction to the next slide. So over 3 years at Concord High School, we have processed about 900 office referrals. Only 23 have resulted in police involvement.
Dr. Herbert, could you tell me what is an office referral exactly defined?
So an office referral, for the case of this, anytime a student is referred to their commons for a behavior or discipline infraction.
Thank you.
So of 900 office referrals over the past 3 years, 23 have resulted in police involvement. Police involvement could be anywhere from meeting with an SRO to be taken out of a difficult situation. Parents called, parent could come pick up the child go home with the parent. However, they did have an interaction that is documented because an SRO assisted in de-escalation of a situation. It's documented. So it's documented as an arrest or a police involvement. In addition to that, we've had situations where students become unsafe towards themselves, and they do need mental health intervention. We contact parents that are unable to come and assist getting this child or their child to a mental health provider. an SRO or another uniformed police officer could come to Concord High School with parent permission and bring that child to a provider and wait until a parent shows and is able to go through that intake process with the child. That simple act of assisting with a student who's suffering mental stability in that moment is constituted as an arrest. The reason, or police involvement, and the reason being because it is police involvement. To document it, it is documented with a case number and goes in the computer as a potential arrest at 170 Warren Street. So these are some of the cases that come up that are reflected as arrest. I want to stress, an arrest at Concord High School does not look like an arrest you would expect out in the community. We do not have on a day-to-day situation, and it's not common. In my 2 years here, I've seen it only once, where a child is actually handcuffed and put in the back of a car. Oftentimes, a child leaves with their parents and are referred for a diversion program that's specific to their needs. If it's drug-related, it's substance use intervention. If it was a disorderly piece, it may be something around what's the word I'm looking for? Aggressive behavior, or a mental health intervention. It could be doing counseling. If it was vandalism of something, it may be doing some community service or repairing what you vandalized, cleaning a wall that you may have spray painted or written all over. There's a number of other outcomes besides actually being arrested and going to court. That does happen. Summons are issued and students are petitioned to the court, but that happens far less frequently than the diversion or a school administrator intervention, which could be community service, meeting with counselors, meeting with a support team, doing that 360 wraparound with a student to make sure we're meeting whatever need was not being met at that point in time. So that describes, situations that I can't get into the particulars of the situations of these 23 police-involved referrals, but what I wanted to do is paint a picture of what a police-involved referral entails. The next slide that Donna Pally is going to go through talks about the arrest at 170 Warren Street. I just want to emphasize, you're going to see on that slide a number of 40. Those 40 are arrests at 170 Warren Street, not arrests necessarily connected to Concord High School. They are 40 arrests of juveniles that took place on or around 170 Warren Street, not necessarily directly connected to a school function or something that occurred in our building. So that's why you're going to see a difference in the numbers. So I just wanted to be clear on that.
Mr. Richards? Jim, could I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Do you have exact numbers for how many of these police involvements are mental health related?
I probably could get those, to be honest with you, Jonathan. That's something that Chief Osgood might be able to provide, and Donna may have.
Awesome. Thank you.
Absolutely, Jonathan. Let's take a look. So there are 3 slides. The Concord Police provided us with information from their records, their arrest records. So these are all the records for 3 years. These are not school years where we usually say 2018-19, 2019-20. These are calendar years. So 2018 would be January 1st to December 31st of 2018. So over the course of 3 years, there were 40 what's called arrests in the categories that the police use. And I'm going to go into the categories in a bit as Dr. Herbert has started to explain. So you can see that these are divided by racial categories that had data. So white students, black students, and Asian students over these 3 years. And I've divided them out by males and females. You can see the percent of the total arrests. You can see the percent of those students as a percent of the student body at Concord High School. And so, for instance, you can see that in the 2018 calendar year, there were 15 of these arrests. In 2019, there were 20. And in 2020, there were 5. I suppose we can count that as a silver lining of COVID. But we have a total of 40. And you can see, for instance, that the percentages can vary quite a lot. So when you have a situation like in 2020 where there's just 5 students, you can see that 40% of the students who were involved in arrests were black students. There were 2 of them, and there were 3 white students. You can see overall that 77.5% of the students over the 3 years were white, and 20% were black, 2.5% Asian. And you can see the disproportionality in the black student category, where students make up roughly 8.5% of the student body and represent 20% of this particular group. Now, also know that these aren't necessarily individual students, they're arrests. So they could involve the same students. So I hope that that's clear on that piece. And also, as Dr. Herbert said, the way that arrests are categorized is by the location. And so it may be that students come onto the campus and are arrested, but they're not necessarily Concord students. But yet, these arrests take place on the campus at Concord High School or outside the campus. I'm going to get in a minute to the offenses. I put here the main ones. There were 12 drug violations, 3 alcohol violations, and the protective custody, which I think Jonathan gets to some of the issues that you spoke about. Sometimes that involves intoxication, and sometimes that may involve a student who's at risk, perhaps related to suicide ideation or suicide attempt or a mental health challenge. Disorderly conduct and tobacco, those were the highest numbers, but I have more details on that. So let's go to the next slide, and I'll break this up by offenses. And I have to use the term offenses carefully because the last one, which is the second largest category, is that protective custody category, which involved 8 of the incidences. And again, you can see the number of drug incidences, alcohol, tobacco, disorderly conduct are our top. Those 4 items were the top 4, and then a handful of others, which I'll give you a minute just to look at across the years.
What do you anticipate as one of the reasons for the large drop-off of drugs from 2018 to 2019?
I don't know. It's a good question. And again, we have to be really careful when they're relatively small numbers. When we think about statistics and we think about what's reasonable, whether that is in fact, with a student body of 1,500, whether that is a significant drop or not, I'm not sure. We certainly have, as you've heard, very active student assistance program counselors who are doing and working hard with students. So I can't speak to that otherwise. All right, we have one more slide, and this is by category. So again, we just want to divide this out, so understanding that arrest on view or incident means that someone saw a crime happening, a crime was reported, and so that's the bulk of those. A summons arrest is like I'm told, like a traffic ticket. You get a ticket, and generally released to a parent or a parent designee. It comes with a court date. It may or may not go to court. It generally does not, the person is not taken into custody, not arrested. And protective custody, again, which remember is not a punitive measure. There's not court involved. It's a protective measure for students. I'm going to stop for a minute and just let you absorb those particular numbers. And happy to take any questions on this or on any aspect of the presentation. Ms. Walsh?
We do not have information on arrests of students of Hispanic origin or students who experience disabilities.
This is all the data that had any data in the cells. This is the data. So I don't believe there were any. I can triple check on that, but there's one in the actual data reports, there aren't any.
Okay. But is that because it didn't happen or because they don't collect the data that way?
I will double check on that.
Thank you.
And this, I'm sorry, did you ask a second part to that question?
Students who, it was two categories, students of Hispanic origin and students who experience disabilities.
I don't have the data. We can look for that data, though.
Can you tell me how many lockdowns there were in those years for both high school, and can you tell me how many lockdowns at Runlet Middle School?
For practice
No, for a
lockdowns?
reason.
Actual lockdowns. That's a
Yeah,
great
not a practice
question.
one, but an actual alerted lockdown.
Yeah, I'm going to ask the principals who are here, Paulette. They have not necessarily all been here for 3 years, but we can certainly get that information.
Thank you.
Yeah. You may remember one of the first times I addressed the board over the SAU, we had a lockdown that day for a student who had a belt made out of spent ammunition casings. So that was, I think I'd been there about 6 days at that point. But that was a while back. Seems like about 10 years ago at this point. I think that's the only one.
We had a secure campus because an individual...
Oh, that's right. There was a patient at the hospital who basically escaped and threatened to come over to high school and hurt people. That information was relayed over here, and the school went into lockdown.
And we had one other incident where we had an individual cross the road in the parking lot vandalizing cars, had a weapon on them, and we went into a secure campus where nobody could enter our building, and officers came and assisted with that. So the 3 since I've been here, Jim, and I've only been here 2.5 years, and 1.5 years, geez. Not in a year on there.
So 3 lockdowns in the last 2 years?
That's Concord High School. And keep in mind, we've been remote for half of 2019, 2020, and remote for a good portion of this year. So not a ton of lockdown need in those situations.
Thank you.
So secure campus, the students in the building can still go to class and such, they just can't go outside.
Yes, it's a lockdown of the entering or exiting the building. The threat is out exterior of the building, and we're not allowing anybody in or out.
Okay.
No, that's okay. No, we haven't had any lockdowns since I've been at Runlet. We've practiced them, but we haven't had any. We haven't had the need, which is a good thing.
Thank you.
Yeah.
How long has Concord High School had an SRO?
A little over 20 years.
Okay.
A little over 20 years.
And you've emphasized that they're not sort of patrolling for discipline purposes. So could you explain what a day looks like for the SRO at the high school?
First, I want to emphasize the first point you made, Pam, which is that the SRO is not patrolling around the halls to deal with situations. Not only does he not do that, if he wanted to do that, I don't think that's something we would be comfortable with. What you are going to see him doing is 2 basic things: interacting with kids out, like Jim, what's your name? Jim used the example of Officer Ryder being at lunches, interacting with kids, and also kids coming to his office down by Commons A and seeking him out for counsel. You'll see that going on throughout the day for a variety of reasons. Kids who are involved with ongoing legal proceedings, kids who are having issues at home. I'm not sure it's wise to talk about this in regard to, I know he doesn't even want me to mention his name, but talk about Officer Ryder in particular, because it could change at any point. But he's established a rapport and a sense of trust among the student body that has made him truly a resource to our kids in the building, and especially, quite frankly, kids who are struggling for a variety of reasons. So you're going to see him out and about, not patrolling the halls, but out talking to kids, especially at lunchtime. I mean, for the rest of the day, there's really not a lot of people out in the hallways. You'll see him out at the beginning of the day, greeting kids as they come in from school, and at the end of the day as they're leaving. And you'll see a lot of interaction with him in his office, with students coming down. A lot of the rest of the day is spent in classes, in the interdisciplinary support groups that he participates in, like the Roundtable Tim mentioned, which just met this morning, right? Yeah, something like that. And so he's involved in a lot of different things. But the idea of a police officer who's there policing, I guess would be the term I would use, is inaccurate. He's interacting with kids, and in so doing, preventing a lot of issues down the road, I feel.
Ms. Hastings, then Mr. Parker, please.
Have students and staff been surveyed about their thoughts on the SRO position?
No, we thought about doing surveys with parents. We thought about doing it with kids. And we certainly could do it with staff, but we didn't do it. You know, I know one of our students did a small survey. She's going to speak when they have an opportunity to do that, but overall we did not.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I was wondering if, you know, what I'm hearing and I'm seeing is that the SRO position has evolved a lot over the years. Is it like now an industry standard? Are there standards for SROs? Are there, you know, is it a qualified profession where, you know, those SRO people get all together and do their SRO talks? I mean, is it, in other words, has it become more of a unified profession? Yeah, is it professionalized, you know?
Yeah, I know that there are. Tim, do you want to? If you.
Well, Dave, I don't have all the details, but there is a certification to be a school resource officer. There is training, and they do have like a local regional SRO group that get together, and they do review the standards and what's appropriate, non-appropriate, and, you know, defining those lines. I don't know if that, I know it doesn't completely answer your question, but that does exist. I just don't, from my perspective, I don't know all the details about it.
The one thing I would add to that is, in my previous incarnation, I think I had 5 different school resource officers, and you know, 2 of them were pretty weak. In fact, I think we were better off not having them there. And again, I know I've been cautioned not to think about this position in terms of an individual, but that's very difficult for me because the strength of this position is really in the, it's not dissimilar, frankly, to a classroom teacher. If you've got to have a poor teacher, they're going to have a poor class. If you have a poor SRO, you're going to have a poor relationship in that school. And the person we have now is the best I've seen. And that could change. I'll be the first to admit, you get somebody different in there, that could very easily change.
Ms. West.
Do we know of those 40 arrests that we were talking about, how many of those the SRO is involved in?
Yeah. The SRO was involved in most each year of those arrests, so we do see not all of them though, because some of them may have taken place outside of school time, so perhaps a dance in the evening or some other time of the day. But most each year were the Concord SRO.
Thank you.
All right. Does Danielle have a question? Okay. Jack, will you do me a favor? I can't see behind me on that board, so if Danielle has a question at this point, please alert me. Thank you. Mr. Weinberg.
I would like to echo Ms. Hastings' question. I would also be really interested if we were to do a survey, what the results of that would be, just for student overall feeling. Additionally, when a SRO is involved in these arrests, what's kind of the process for that?
The process is that we have school responsibilities and he has police responsibilities. The first course of action is always to make sure that anyone who's involved in that situation is safe. If they need medical care, that's obviously a priority. And Tim, actually, this is right up your alley about the actual process that the officer goes through in terms of working through an arrest. But before he does that, I just want to make a point. I know that things like arrests jump out at you and you're looking at this data. And this is, I think as you saw with the numbers that Donna was putting up there, this is a pretty minuscule part of, thankfully, of what goes on at the school. The heart of this position is in the relationships, both with the kids and the families and the community, that the SRO brings. That the arrest part of this is peripheral. I don't think that's too strong of a term. It's something that's really kind of on the side. When it needs to be done, it is absolutely important that someone who has the patience and the control and the knowledge is doing that. And you guys can put the emphasis, obviously, wherever you want, but I don't think that that's the heart of what we're trying to express in understanding this position.
Jonathan, when you say arrest, are you thinking in the situation of a student being cuffed and brought out of the school? Are you thinking like in our protective custody situations, or?
I guess just kind of thinking about what would lead up to it. What would the officer, what would the school resource officer's first step be, and then kind of after that?
The SRO is usually not the first step. Somebody such as myself, a school counselor, one of our I don't want to say in-house mental health providers, but our counselors here try and meet with the student, surround the students with their support team, and de-escalate whatever the situation is. If it's self-harm, we have a threat assessment process. We go through the process, and if we get to a point where we're convinced an assessment needs to be done because the student's in danger of harming themselves, then we would contact the parents before we involve the SRO. And if a parent could get here in a timely manner to address the need of the child and get them the assistance they need, the SRO is never involved. It's when a parent's maybe working in Boston, Massachusetts, I'm an hour away, the threat is real, the child needs the intervention now, that we would contact an SRO. They would come in, we would debrief with them about the situation. There'd be a moment in time where they get to know the child, and when it's an emotional experience for a child in that situation. They need to know who they're leaving with. Having the SRO, that makes it much easier in those situations because it's a familiar face. And then they would leave with the SRO. They are at times, and this sounds troubling, but at times are cuffed because in the transport from here to hospital or to services, we need to make sure they don't inflict harm upon themselves. In other incidents, it would say if it was drug related, in a case a child comes in, I get a report, Mr. Herbert, I believe XYZ is under the influence of marijuana. I smelt when he or she came into the classroom. Could you investigate this? I get the report. I sit down with the child. Believe it or not, I know 10 times I say to the child, I got to be honest with you, I smell marijuana on you. Did you use this morning? Yes, I did. It's amazing how often just that simple question. So you get that response. You bring in a nurse, evaluate the student's health, well-being in the moment. With the synthetic THC and other stuff out there, we've had students go absolutely, I don't want to say comatose, but out cold in a classroom, vomiting, ash gray, and we're calling ambulances to assist with them. So whenever we have anything drug related, we get a nurse involved to do a health assessment. We contact home, a parent comes in, we meet with the parent, a discipline piece is put in place by me. oftentimes a suspension. In addition, we will roll back a suspension with if they agree to meet with our student assistance counselor, which specializes in substance uses, and agree to participate in multiple meetings afterwards with that person, and agree to meet with their counselor and talk about, whatever need they're trying to meet by using substances. Then, when all that is said and done, if they had something on them that's confiscated, I would conduct a search. I'll ask a student, are you in possession of drugs? Are you in possession of paraphernalia? You will be, again, 9 out of 10 times, they say, yes, Mr. Herbert. Where is it? It's right here. They'll open up their bag. Here you go. It's a refreshing response, and it happens more often than not. That child usually goes home with their parents, and I inform them and their parent in the meeting that they will likely be contacted by the SRO, that I'm required to report it. I go down, meet with the SRO. They put into the evidence bag the stuff that I collected, and he does an interview with me. Tell me about Jonathan. What's he like as a student? Has this happened before? How did this come about? He does a full interview. How cooperative was he? Did he divulge? Do you know of anything going on outside of school? What do you think his needs are? And then he contacts the parent. He meets with the parent, talks with the parent. Sometimes he's able to do that when the parent comes and picks up the child. The parent opts to have that opportunity. So that technically constitutes an arrest where the officer never takes the child into custody. But they could be petitioned or referred to diversion depending on the situation. Does that kind of give you an idea? You wouldn't, half the time, Jonathan, you don't realize it's an arrest, if that makes sense.
That was perfect. Thank you.
I just got asked to explain court diversion. So court diversion, when a student would be referred to a police officer, given the situation I just described, would say substances, where in the instance marijuana or THC, which is commonly found in the vape form. So it's illegal. In fact, THC, possession by a minor, is a rather high offense. The synthetic stuff out there right now. We report it to the SRO, and he meets with me, does this interview, learns about the child, and I say he again because right now we have a male SRO. The SRO would then say, I'm going to advocate for diversion. This child does not have a past record, was cooperative. There's a lot more going on outside of school, et cetera, for this child, and they need support. They don't need the hammer of the law coming down on them. So diversion is an educational experience tailored to the child's needs and the behavior that got them referred to the police. So if it's substance, it would be substance use education. If it was, it might be an anger management if it was more of a disorderly conduct response. The other diversion pieces, if it's like vandalism, you have a facilitator who helps walk you through the situation, what you're experiencing, processing your feelings. Why did you commit this act of vandalism, and how are you going to repair it? Some people don't have the monetary means to fix what they've done, but they can show up in a simple act of empathy for the people harmed by their vandalism, and assist them in doing landscaping around the school or something of that nature. But so those are kind of the diversion programs. That's a really broad generalization of the programs, but I hope that gives you some idea what diversion entails. It's supposed to be education in nature.
Ms. Cannon.
I just want to ask people, for people who may not be aware, I am profoundly hard of hearing, and so as this has evolved into sort of a conversation, what's happened is that people are sort of speaking more quietly and more quickly. If it's at all possible, I would ask for people to speak more slowly, and because we're all wearing masks, everything's kind of muted. So I would ask if people could please speak up and speak a little more slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. And also, please, putting your microphone close to your mouth makes quite a difference for those people who are listening remotely, as well as those in the auditorium. So thank you. Other board questions for Mr. Reardon? Yes, Ms. Walsh.
The students who are referred to diversion, are they counted in the arrest records?
Yes, they are.
Sorry.
But they don't receive any criminal record.
Thank you.
If they successfully complete diversion. Oh, I'm sorry. If they successfully complete the diversion, that it's not, they don't have a record.
Thank you. Just as I'll ask the first question, and then we'll go. Everybody raise their hand at once. Has there been a comprehensive student survey on how students feel, whether they are in favor of or not in favor of the SRO, or any other details with regard to that?
I think, was it Kate or Jonathan that asked that earlier? As of now, Jim, no, there hasn't been, but it's something we certainly could do if the board would like us to.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I couldn't hear that answer, so I just wanted to ask that again. And as far as the people in the audience that are both here and on for asking questions, there will be that opportunity just a little bit later after the board has a chance to answer the question. So I just ask for you to please be patient. Now it was Ms. West, and then I didn't see who else had their hand up with it. It was Mr. Weinberg, but go ahead.
I was just wondering if we have the information on how many of those arrests were diversion and then what the alternatives. It's a no.
No, we weren't provided with that information, but I can see if we can get that, what the outcome was for these.
Thank you.
No? Other questions from the board? Yeah, go ahead, please, Ms.
So this isn't a question so much as me sort of sharing my experience. So I'm the only board member here that taught at Concord High, and I taught here for 8 years. I taught health, coached track. I had more than my share of confidential sharings with students in trouble, all kinds of trouble. And a very, very common response and process for me with these students often involves student assistance and the SRO. 90% of the time, both of them, because they would bring to the table separate knowledge bases and community connections to the problems that the students had. And I had bad things happening at home shared with me, students thinking they were pregnant shared with me, you know, my boyfriend's drunk, it's period 6, shared with me. All of the things that one might expect would bring me there. And I know there's a very, very common belief that the SRO is a cop at the school, and I suppose he is a cop and he's at the school, so it's a logical mistake to make. But in my 8 years teaching here and seeking these people out way more than once, always the students were treated very, very kindly by both. But it really was a three-way dance. It was the teacher, the student assistance program, you know, drug and alcohol person, which 9 times out of 10 connects to a million other things. The other story I'd like to share is during health class once, I turned around and 2 students were fighting, like really physically fighting. They were girls. One was black, one was white. I foolishly got in the middle of them and ended up with a few chiropractor appointments and such. But I called for help, and it was the principal, Mr. Connolly, and then the SRO at the time. And this ended up in court, and this officer was so kind and supportive of the cultural differences that led the student of color to behave in the manner she behaved. And she really just did what she knew. And his willingness to really advocate for her in a court of law, you know, as a kid that really made decisions that were logical to her that we couldn't understand being born here. I just share these things because as I'm listening to all of this, I'm remembering my experience as an educator with students, a variety of students. And I imagine it's probably very similar now. But that's what, and that was, you know, I'm talking 2008, 2009, like a long time ago.
Yeah, I would just briefly add that were an SRO or frankly any other school personnel abusive towards students, they would not be there. As simple as that.
Yeah, he was fantastic. It's a different guy, but I mean, he was wonderful.
Other questions? Mr. Weinberg.
I remember reading through just the various school policies in general regarding physical restraint. How how's the SRO Act regarding, or just, I guess, administration or school policy overall?
Yeah. The only time we as administrators or even a classroom teacher is going to use physical restraint is to make sure that students aren't hurting others or themselves. In other words, if they're hurling haymakers at each other, you lock them up so that they're not doing harm. As far as the SRO goes, I think that our present officers' best characteristic is an infinite patience. And I'll tell you quite frankly, I've been a couple of times with students who were getting on my nerves, frankly, and but he never wavered, just kept his voice low, kept asking the student to focus, to think about what they were doing. It was quite impressive. It taught me a lesson as well. Someone like our present SRO is more than capable of, if he needs to, of restraining anyone he needs to. He's trained to do that. He's capable of doing it. But I've never seen him do it, Tim. I don't know that you have either. I mean, again, I want to emphasize to the board that, anything can happen, obviously. And there's a lot of kids there. But the stuff doesn't happen. It has not been happening so far. That's why I made the point a little while ago about trying to de-emphasize thinking about arrests. I understand they're important, and we have to keep an eye on it, and we have to make sure that things are out of balance in terms of the kids who are being arrested. But it's really a very small part of what he does.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, Ms. West.
There was in these slides towards the beginning the list of, I cannot find it, but the list of things that need to be reported. One of them is theft over $50. Can you just explain really quickly, is that because of the memorandum of understanding in that agreement that was made, or is there a law that supersedes that?
That's in the memorandum of understanding. That's the agreement between the school district and the police department.
So we are essentially, that is a Concord, no, it's not, okay.
No.
So
it is a law. Okay.
RSA 193D, those are the acts that we're required to report. The memorandum of understanding put the $50 limit to it. That $50 limit is based on the memorandum of understanding. However, you could go to another school and it could be a $150 limit. However, theft of whatever limits designated in that memorandum of understanding is required to be reported. But does that make it any clearer? I don't know.
So the theft itself would have to be reported, but the memorandum dictates the amount.
Yep. So if it was something like you took my pen and my notepad, Tim Herbert, the Joe Schmo AP, could address that versus me having to report that. So we try and distinguish between, I don't want to call it petty theft, but minor theft that could be addressed through school discipline versus $50 being a considerable amount of money for most families, and trying to put that kind of price tag to something that constitutes the report. Does that help any, Kate? I don't know.
It does, but it brings up more questions, but I might need to, I didn't know. So then drugs is on that list, so then the question becomes, are all instances, every single instance of
every single drug instance reported.
Okay.
It doesn't mean it results in arrest. It doesn't, or diversion or anything of that nature, but every mandated reporter of every single drug incident. Any other questions? Okay.
Any other questions? Check. Is Danielle good? Okay. Superintendent? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cannon.
So I know that there was a question about whether the students have been polled about their opinion. Has anyone polled the teachers as well?
Gina, I think that they addressed that earlier, and yeah, so I hope you can hear what I have to say. They have not polled staff or students. There has been some informal polling, but not anything that was a standardized poll to everyone.
Okay.
But I think that both Michael and Tim indicated that we're more than happy to do a standardized poll out to our students as well as to the families and staff.
I apologize if that was a repeat.
I hear you. It is hard to hear. It is hard. I mean, I'm struggling. I wanted to make a couple of points, though, before. I know, Jim, you want to open it up to the public, and I'm going to be brief. Both the 193 that Tim referred to, that's all law. We have to follow those rules. We have no choice, as well as restraint. Restraint is very clear. And not only are those laws very clear, they must report them. They have an obligation to report them. They have to report them to the Department of Ed, and they do that every year when they do their safety reports. You go on to the Department of Ed, you will find the profile, and you just click on to Concord, and you will see those safety reports. I don't know if the last year is up, and of course the last year, 15 months has been skewed, right, because of COVID, but that information must be reported by June 30 of every single year, so we have an obligation to do that. The restraint, Jonathan, our staff is trained, and obviously the police are trained in that because he practices de-escalation strategies, because the last thing they ever want to do is to have to use a restraint if a student is out of control for whatever reasons. Okay, I just wanted to clear those up. I'm good to go here.
Thank you. Just two things. I actually looked up RSA 193D prior to this evening because I had known about that law. Just 193D4 addresses that, and to Ms. West, what the law actually says is that any act of theft needs to be reported, but then the next provision, a later provision, allows the memorandum of understanding to define those numbers. So from a state law perspective, they want all theft, but they do give some leeway with that. Ms. Cannon, while we don't have and I think it would be actually my personal view as one board member thinks it would be good for us to do that survey, Superintendent. We did receive a letter from the teachers on January 5th, 2020.
Yes.
That did actually refer to the SRO, and I don't know if you've seen that, but it's available for all the board too. Okay. Other questions? Or Superintendent.
In your, I'm sorry, in your files on the Google Drive, all of the letters that came in are there. And even today, as late as today, I received a letter from a staff member at Concord High School and talked about their experience, she and a colleague. So there are other letters in your file. They've been coming in. They came in late this afternoon. So I would encourage you to take some time. Jonathan alerted to me that some of them didn't get into my email system, so I'll go back and check. Sometimes they end up in spam, so depending on where the email is coming from. So I will check that, and then I will add those letters to your file, because we did get staff letters.
Thank you. We appreciate all the information and opinions and letters that people have sent in, so we want to make sure we get to see them all. If there are no other board questions and no other presentation materials, I think it's appropriate now that we enter the public hearing portion of this meeting and hear from those members of the community that would like to express an opinion. And thank you, Josh, for blinding me. Let me lean back here. At this time, let's go with that. Mr. Dunn, you will be handling anything, I assume, that is coming in remotely. But First off, at this time, I would like to mention that all public comment needs to be within the policy number 136, sorry, of the Concord School Board. Please limit your comments to 5 minutes or less. Please, to be respectful for everyone, we want to hear everyone's comments. It is important, and the board has expressed that. I will also ask you to please be respectful of your fellow citizens in making your comments, as always. And with that, Mr. Dunn, where will be the microphone for those do you have that one?
And then
okay. Excellent. So for those, we'll start with those people who are here physically in the auditorium. If you would like to make a comment, please, I will ask you to please come down the aisle to my right. Make your comment. There should be, is there hand sanitizer there?
Yeah, I have it all.
Excellent. See Mr. Dunn for the microphone. And as you exit, would you please go across the front of the stage and up the left. We do still maintain our COVID protocols. So thank you all for coming in, and would the first person who'd like to make a public comment please come down.
May I just ask that they state their name clearly and their address, because Lyndon is is transcribing today's meeting, so she needs to have that for her minutes.
Very good. The person transcribing our meeting is remote, and so I will ask you to please state your name into the microphone and your address. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Mike Pelletier, and I am a 5th grade teacher at Krista McAuliffe School. I have 2 daughters in the district. One attends Runlet, and one is a 5th grader at CMS. I am proud to say that both will attend Concord High School. I'd like to touch upon 2 topics tonight. The first is DARE in our elementary schools, and the second is SRO position at the high school. 4 years ago, I requested a meeting with Terry Forston about implementing the DARE program at Krista McAuliffe for 5th graders. As a classroom teacher, I was seeing more and more students with difficult home lives and going through some big-time stuff. After a few back and forth meetings, Terry approved it, and we had the pleasure of having Officer Melissa Pfefferly and Ryan Howe in our 5th grade classrooms for a 10-week DARE program. I was fortunate to be in the classroom while these officers were working and teaching the kids. The program mainly focuses on decision-making. The primary focus is dealing with peer pressure, resistance strategies, signs of stress, confident communication, and communicating effectively. There are 1 or 2 lessons around alcohol and tobacco, but that certainly isn't the focus of the entire 10-week program. More importantly, my students had the opportunity to develop a positive relationship with an essential member of our community. These officers related well to the kids and kept it very age appropriate. The kids looked forward to their time and got a lot out of the experience. The plan was to start DARE a few weeks before February vacation. Unfortunately, we were told that it's unable to start until we see what was decided at tonight's meeting. First, I have a question for the board. Has anyone either reached out or shadowed our current student resource officer, Brendan Ryder, at the high school?
That has been discussed, and I know there are individual board members that have asked that to do that exact item. There is a little bit of COVID-related items that we need to adjust with that, but thank you for asking, and that has come up here. Does anybody else on the board have any other comments to answer that question? We may not be able to answer everyone's questions this evening, but if we can, I think it's okay that we do.
I understand. Thank you.
Mr. Weinberg, did you want to say? Oh.
Yes, I would just like to echo those comments. There are definitely individuals on the board who are interested in that.
Okay, thank you. I did reach out to him. I reached out through a phone call and an email, and here's what I found out. Our current SRO has had specific training around being a police officer, as was covered in the slideshow, in a school, and we are fortunate that he's a former educator. He worked as an administrator at Parker Academy for Dave. The SRO keeps administration and staff informed of what's going on with the kids in the community and how it could be impacting them at school. SROs have absolutely nothing to do with school discipline, and they have no part in suspensions or classroom management of any kind. If there's no SRO in the building, it means inconsistency in the officers responding to the incidents at the high school that require police notification or intervention. Reports are mandated by the New Hampshire Safe Schools Act. This means officers showing up who do not know our kids, building, culture, etc. If students are not feeling comfortable with the SRO/police, then we should do our best as educators to educate them and show them that the SRO police are here to help them and keep them safe, not by just pulling the position away. It solves nothing and only increases the tension around police in our community. I've always been proud to work in Concord, and I'm proud to send my kids to Concord Public Schools. My hope is that the board compiles their own data and takes the time to see this program in action. That means actually visiting the schools and observing what goes on. It is my feeling that this position to remove the police from our schools is purely political and based on non-applicable data. The board needs to compile true and accurate data that is relevant to CHS before deciding to move on the SRO. That's what quality education is all about. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
This is my daughter Sadie, and she'd like to say something as well.
Thank you. You can state your name, and you don't have to say your full address, but do please say what town you're from. Thanks.
Hi, I am Sadie Pelletier from Concord, New Hampshire. I am a 5th grader at CMS. This has been a hard year for us because we have missed out on so much in 5th grade. Things like field trips, special events, and being with my whole class. I was looking forward to DARE because I heard from my older sister that we learn a lot and get to ask questions in the DARE box. Please allow the Concord Police to teach us this year so we don't miss out on one more thing. Thank you. Oh, and one more thing. Please let us go back to school 4th time.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sadie.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay with my mask on?
Yes.
Yeah? Sorry, I'll try to project. I'm pretty good at that. I'm Sarah Robinson. I am a Concord, New Hampshire resident, and I have 2 elementary school-age children who attend Christa McAuliffe. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the effort and moral courage exhibited by Madison Howard and her student cohort, who were the architects of the original petition over a year ago to remove the SRO from our schools. Without their bravery and willingness to speak up, we would not be having this conversation today. Our students have told us that they do not feel safe. It's clear that student safety is of the utmost importance to our district. These students' concerns need to be addressed. I will invoke the civil rights statement, nothing about us without us, and I notice that we don't have any students present here tonight. They may be over Zoom, and I hope that is the case. Ours is a state and a culture that continually removes social support programs while expecting punitive action and incarceration to address the aftermath of those cuts to social supports. We're all in agreement that the presence of a uniformed individual in the school building does not magically do away with the consequences of poverty, racism, abuse, or neglect. If our community truly cares about students, their experiences and outcomes, then we would be having a very different conversation right now. Adults cry out that an SRO is about student safety and ultimately their mental health. I would argue that this is not the actual root of support for SROs, but the continued fear adults harbor and our unwillingness to address the roots of child behavior and mental health issues. I am a proponent of restorative justice, and this is a perfect instance for our district to employ those methods. I'm not asking for the current police officer to be ripped from his post without consequence, but that there be a serious and meaningful conversation about and plan for moving forward. This will ultimately be a part of the work of the Anti-Racism Task Force supported by the school district, of which I am a member. We don't need to wait to take action. We can start right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments today.
I had a slides presentation. So my name is Michaela McCurley. I am a student that goes to Concord High School, and a lot of you have been asking questions about how you want to hear students' opinions on a lot of this matter. A lot of you have been asking for a student's opinion on this matter, and I am a student here, and I personally feel a lot safer having a school resource officer here, not just because he protects us within the form of law, and that's his job, but because he's here to provide safety for us and give us a form of comfortableness that a lot of us have. And up here I have shown that kind of what they do and a little bit of background of why the Justice Department chose to have these positions at schools, and what they do and everything in the official job description is to work with the school on developing comprehensive safety plans to ensure schools are a safe place for students to learn. And there are a lot of responsibilities that SROs have that we as outsiders don't see and don't acknowledge. If you really think about it, if the Department of Justice didn't put this effort into having these positions, what would schools be like now? In the next slide that I had, I pointed out the facts that this is also coming from my point of view being a student at Concord High School, that these officers don't just provide the safety, they provide a bond and create relationships with the students. And in our minds, subconsciously, we do feel more protective having a police officer around rather than not having one, even if we don't realize it. They become a part of students' lives, and this could really affect positively on a student and how they think and even how they are at school, just knowing that there is somebody there that can protect them. And with you guys asking for a lot of students' opinions, I did put together a survey that I sent out to a few of my peers, and I got about 72 responses from my friends and other peers that I have. I asked if they personally feel safer having a school resource officer. With 72 responses, 76.4% of them said that they do, and only 23.6% said that they don't. And I asked if you think that they should keep the school resource officers, and 86.5% said that yes, they should keep it, and 13.5% said no. If you go down more, I put in a section where students could put their comments and what they thought about this, and these are some comments that students made. One of them that stuck out is, he gives good advice, and I feel like if anything bad were to happen, he would be able to help. And because it gives me peace of mind knowing that there is an officer already in the school in case of something were bad to happen. And he says, because they are people too, they're very down to earth and make small chat all the time. They are very kind and understanding, and if the school got rid of them, I would be very upset and angry. These are reviews from our students at our school, and a lot of the ones that I got on the survey were talking about how they feel safer. I also got some that were against it, but they were talking about how some SROs kind of stay there but not kind of put themselves as part of the community, and that they don't make us feel comfortable in ways because they are there as police officers. But knowing you guys, knowing that he is a resource officer there to help our students and things like that, you know that they're there to do what they are supposed to do. And there are students that really realize that for what they are. And I just wanted to say thank you to Mr. Reardon and Mr. Herbert for supporting me on it. And I am in CRTC Criminal Justice Program. My teacher is Miss B. I'm a first-year student, and she was very helpful with this. She put in a lot of comments and is very supportive on me in making these decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. McCurley, and thank you for staying under 5 minutes as well. Thank you.
This puts a lot of pressure on our admins to get some good surveys going.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
My name is Chrissy Ferrara, and I am a Concord resident. And I actually have a bunch of questions that I don't need the answers to, but I want them recorded. Most of them are based on the slideshow that we just earlier saw. And I want to express my concerns about putting so much emphasis in one person to handle so many issues within the school. I'd like to know specifically how much training an SRO officer gets, for de-escalation training, how often, what trainings do they have in child development? What do they understand about the new Americans that are here and the cultural aspects that they bring with them as they try to coexist and blend in and feel at home in their new homes? I want to know why the SRO is deemed, according to the PowerPoint, to work with children with disabilities. Where is the training for that? There are people who spend years and studying to work with children with disabilities in child development. I'd like to know more about that and why an SRO is considered a mental health expert as well. I'd like to know why we can call them an SRO and not say that they're police and then later on call them police and say that they can handcuff children. I'm finding that there's a lot of different, what is the word I'm looking for? I'm going to keep going. Sorry. So I'd like to understand, once somebody mentioned something about children talking to the SRO about their current court cases. I would like to know if that is legal for underage children to be talking to SROs who can take that information and then, if possible, use it against them, and what is the legality of that. And I'd just like to say I think we should look at other ways of managing and working with our children so that they can overcome some of the issues that they have besides working with a police officer. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Lyndon, were you able to get most of those questions? I haven't too. Okay, Lyndon, if some of us wrote them down if you need assistance in clarifying any of those questions. Thank you. Yes, please.
Good evening. My name's Elizabeth Leahy. I live in Ward 10, and I'm a parent of a school-aged child in Concord. I'm speaking in favor of eliminating the SRO role from Concord High School and against adding one.
Make sure we're talking close to the microphone.
Against adding one to Runlet Middle School. There's been a common refrain among supporters of the SRO position that they, one, believe the presence of SROs makes students safer and promotes their well-being. It's often accompanied by a sentiment that while problems may exist nationally or in other places, that those problems don't exist here, that our SRO is good, and therefore there's no need to eliminate the position. I'd like to address all three of these points. Throughout this discussion, the burden has been placed squarely on proponents of removal to present evidence and prove that there are student safety issues associated with the SRO at Concord High School. We've met this burden. As everyone on the board should be well aware, in 2017, 15, 13, and 11, Black students and students with disabilities at Concord High School were referred to law enforcement at significantly higher rates than their peers. These same students were more likely to be subjected to exclusionary discipline than their peers. And we just learned today that from 2018 to 2020, at a time when 8.5% of the population of our students were Black, they represented 20% of arrests. And as Ms. Pally kind of posited during her presentation, could this data reflect multiple students being arrested at the same time? I don't know. Where's that data? Putting out a question without answer isn't helpful. Could there be more non-students who are being arrested? I don't know. Where's the data? The data shows us a problem, and creating questions, hypothetically, when you hold the data, isn't helpful, and it's not a mechanism to undermine the data. And if you go back beyond 3 years, 2017 shows that there were 47 kids referred to law enforcement and 40 were arrested. And in 2015, 208 students at Concord High School were referred to law enforcement, which is more than any high school I found in the state ever, going through the US DOE data. We learned this week that there's a disparity that also exists within our community at large. Concord police disproportionately arrest black people at higher rates than white people in our city. These are student safety problems in our school. And while the emphasis on data is not wrong, our limited focus is. We have not rigorously examined or sought evidence to determine the converse, whether police officers at Concord High School positively impact actual student safety, or as Principal Reardon said, make CHS a better place. In fact, there's very little data nationally or locally to support this proposition or to ground a decision to maintain the SRO position. Without data, we are left with statements and beliefs about police officers in school increase an amorphous and undefined precept of safety. These statements and beliefs, no matter how many people make them, should ring hollow, as they are nothing more than unsupported feelings. Moreover, these unsupported feelings are hardly universal. There are some who say the opposite, that the presence of police in their schools makes them feel uncomfortable. And rightfully so. The handbook contemplates students being referred to the SRO for legal action and notes that the SRO can take students into custody. But most importantly, without data to support the efficacy of our current system, there's no basis to maintain it. We can't defer to unsupported beliefs or feelings of an undefined concept of safety. We need to be guided by data and facts. And here, the data and facts tell us that the district has real disparities in how it treats and disciplines its students, including referrals to law enforcement. And the role of SRO is inextricably linked to this problem. The second point is that I'd like to address is that problems related to SRO might exist elsewhere, but they don't here. And therefore, there's no need to take action related to our SRO. First, for a lot of the reasons I just said, I would disagree with the premise that problems don't exist here. But even if Concord has not had an incident involving excessive force or brutality by an SRO against a student, it does not mean that we are absolved from the need to act or that our current system does not present risks to students. There has not been a mass shooting in a New Hampshire or Concord school, but regardless, every school takes steps to address that possibility that one could happen. In fact, one such step was the installation of SROs, but again, there's little to no data to support that the SRO helps in any way to stop crime or mass shootings. We didn't hear any of that data today. Why do we do this? To make structural changes to our buildings, have active shooter training with the youngest of children, when we don't have a mass shooting problem, and the statistical probability of having one here is exceedingly small. Because we see our kids in the faces of kids who are killed in school shootings. Any child could conceivably be a victim of a school shooting. And so we are motivated to take steps to protect our children's well-being from these risks, no matter how remote they may be. The problem, however, is that many of us don't see our kids' faces in the faces of all kids. We don't see our kids' faces in the face of a black 6-year-old girl from Florida who had a tantrum at school and was arrested for it. Her tiny wrists placed in handcuffs and her little body carted off to the police station in a cruiser. We don't see our kids in the face of the 9-year-old black girl from Rochester, New York, who was pepper sprayed by a police officer for noncompliance. The police officer who had been called to her home to help her because she was suicidal. The officer was trying to help by forcibly taking her into custody, which is something we heard today that our SRO is intended to do. As we watch the video of the incident, we do not feel the familiar indignation that we see when we see a 9-year-old girl handcuffed in the back of a cruiser, tearfully reminding the adult police officer over and over again, "I'm a child." We watch these videos and other videos of police violence against children and agree that they're awful, but while we see what's happening to those children, deep down we know that that will never happen to our kids. Many of us can watch these videos and not see a risk to our kids. And because of that, we can rationalize keeping our current system, despite its inherent problems and risks. But that is not the reality for many families in this community, including mine, who watches these videos and has to grapple with the risk that the same thing could happen to their child. It's also not the reality for families who have lived or witnessed firsthand what we see in those videos. But imagine if we did. If we saw our kids in the faces of those black kids, would we feel safe knowing that our kid might be referred to law enforcement if they acted out, made a mistake, or were upset at school? That they'd referred to a law enforcement officer who has the power to interrogate, detain, and arrest our child, who carries a firearm, a taser, pepper spray, handcuffs that they could use on our kid? Would we feel safe handing our child's social, emotional, and behavioral well-being over to a police officer and potentially to the criminal justice system? To an officer, which this is available online through police standards and training, who's completed a 5-day basic SRO class and maybe a 1.5-day training on the complex subject of children's mental health. What comfort would we take in the assurance that the particular police officer at their school is good because they haven't arrested or pepper sprayed any child yet?
Ms. Leahy, can you wrap up? Thank you.
As I wrap up, I will say that I am sympathetic to the concerns of some teachers that they will be called upon to address student behaviors if the role is eliminated. Teachers, like law enforcement, have been for far too long asked to address societal problems for which they are neither trained nor qualified, and this is not the result for which we advocate. Instead, we ask for the following: the elimination of the role of SRO at Concord High School, establish a policy limiting the role of law enforcement in schools and clearly outlining the rare instances where law enforcement may be called to schools or permitted to interact with children. And third, to invest in school staff who are trained to ensure safe and positive school climates for learning and building relationships with students. The district should also provide ongoing training and support to all staff in conflict management and de-escalation. Thanks.
Thank you. You can send that information in to us, though, if you have any additional. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Melissa Clark. I live at 60 Burstdale Road here in Concord. I'm also a parent, a taxpayer, and a substitute teacher in the district, and had a child that attended Abbott Downing last year. I'm actually curious as to why it has to be one or the other. I'm not denying that there is some sort of systematic breakdown when it comes to police officers in our country right now. Not all police officers are bad, and I understand that there is definitely a racial divide and things that are being missed or overseen.
Can you please speak up a little bit for the...
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay. No.
Better?
Yes.
I'm wondering why it has to be yay or nay. Why are we not looking at a broader spectrum of, is there training that is being missed? Is there more training that our SRO officer can do than what they're already doing? What is the national standards, and can we do better than the national standards? Is there any additional training that they can be doing? I don't believe that getting rid of an SRO officer is going to solve any of our problems, but I think that training will. The umbrella that the slideshow shown was super helpful, but is there any additional resources that we could be adding to that would somehow benefit not only our students, but our SRO officer as well in handling these problems, de-escalating the situation, and what we can do as a community to support our SRO officer, even when it comes to I mean, nobody wants to pay more taxes, but I'd rather see it going towards training and beneficial programs that would benefit our entire community as a whole and making everybody feel safe and not making other students feel unsafe because there's not an SRO officer, because now we're shifting the balance. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
I agree with that previous comment wholeheartedly. My name is Maureen Adams. I've had 1 former, 2 current students at Concord High. I'd also like to thank Michaela for her survey. I think that shows initiative and a lot of work, and I commend you for that. It was well done. I also thank this woman here with the comments about, you know, the racial justice and everything, which is, you know, very a big deal in our community right now. But I also agree that if there's an issue, education should be the answer, not elimination. I was on the task force for safety. One of the 3 parents, I was asked to be on this task force. I know Donna Pally from that as well. After the Howie Leung case, and that was formed, it sort of dissolved a little bit with COVID and then the advent of the Title IX officers. So I worked with the police department then. I know both the previous and the current SRO because I have sought them out. I've sought them for information about their role over the years, the past 3-4 years, and I've sought them out for help with my own children. I have also had conversations with the current SRO about drug education in our schools for more than just the 1 hour in 5th grade that the DARE program provides. By the time kids are getting out of middle school, a lot of them are already addicted to drugs that they've been given in school, and I know this personally. I think if we want to do statistics, drug use in the Concord school system and how many addicts we have started is a good statistic to look at. However, the SRO is not a position that's just appointed without a thought. It's a role that somebody seeks out from the Concord PD because they're interested in working here. They have to provide a resume, if you will, to say why they think they'd be good at this job. They have to meet with a panel at the high school to also say why they want this job, and they're chosen from a group of applicants. They do have a lot of background working with kids. I've worked with a lot of the Concord PD. I've also had a lot of interaction with the Concord juvenile court system. The SRO is very familiar with the court system. They're familiar with the diversion program, which is really a great program for students. If they commit a crime, they have drugs in school, something like that, instead of being charged right off the bat, they're given a chance to get a free ride if they keep their nose clean, and that's part of the diversion program. And the SRO, being part of the police department, they know who's in this system, and they're not here to give those kids a hard time. They're here to help those kids keep their nose clean, to help them make good decisions. I've sat in a room with the SRO and a vice principal and a student, and I've seen him talk to this child, asking what his future plans were. What are you doing? Do you play sports? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And, you know, drugs don't seem to fit into that. So how can we help you with making better choices? How can we do that? They also remind these kids who are in the diversion program and students in the school, once they turn 17, they can be charged as an adult in the court system by the time they get their court case. They're here to remind kids of that. They're here to be proactive, not punitive. Their first reaction is not to handcuff people and not to look at color. And I know that because I've had a lot of interaction with both SROs. And I will tell you the reason I do is because the previous SRO, even pre-Howie Leung, said to me one day in his office, parents have no idea what goes on in this school. And I said, you're right, because no one tells us. How many of you know there are gangs in the school here, Concord High? How many of you know drugs are handed out in the hallway? How many of you know that high-profile, popular kids are selling their mixed amphetamine drugs to other kids to snort in the bathrooms? How many of you know that? I've heard that personally from students. It's going on, and I think without the SRO here, being the eyes and ears of safety and law in our school, It's like running a red light. You wouldn't do it if there's a police car right there. What would you do if the police car wasn't there and you're late for work and the light's red, turning red? The choice would probably not be the same. So I think having an SRO here, we can educate if there are problems, absolutely. I think even the thought of putting that role on the chopping block is insane. We've had sexual predators grooming young girls in our hallway for years in this school. We've all learned that that's not okay. We've learned that that was going on and it was suppressed. Multiple emails coming from Kathleen Murphy about transparency in this school. I still disagree that there's transparency, but we're getting there. We're making progress. What goes on in this school is amazing. How many of you know there was a girl passed out unconscious in the bathroom from overdosing on some type of vape liquid? How many of you know that? And you know who was called? The SRO. And he was there in seconds to give Narcan. Not the nurse. The nurse wasn't called. The SRO, a student who was scared that her classmate was down on the floor unconscious in the bathroom. How many of you know, I'm sure you know this, there was a kid with an ammunition belt in school recently, sitting in class. SRO was there in a matter of seconds. How many of you know there was an alleged drug-related murder at a Pennacook store a year or so ago, and a kid who was arrested for that, awaiting his court date, was a student here. He was still in school. He was on the track team, waiting for his court date. I didn't know that. I had seen the pictures in the paper and everything else. I didn't know that kid was side by side with my kid till my kid pointed it out. But the SRO knew that, so the SRO keeps track of people who are gang members that they know of. They know from working for the city PD. They wouldn't know that as a social worker. They wouldn't know that as a mental health worker. They wouldn't know that as administration necessarily. I also know about programs that the current SRO was trying to get started. He was doing the New Hampshire Distracted Driving Task Force. He was working with them to do safe driving in school education. He was working with Breathe New Hampshire. That's something I wanted to get involved in with him and start at very young grades to help kids stop vaping and educate them on drug use. It's kind of like the DARE program, only instead of an hour for 10 weeks in 5th grade, it's all the way through school. And the current SRO really has a passion for that and wanted to do that as well and was starting with that.
Can you wrap up, please?
Yeah.
Is there time?
So I just want to say that the role is rehabilitative and positive. It's not punitive. I also am surprised to hear that you would interview students on what they think of the SRO and no one ever mentioned parents. I want an SRO in my kid's school. I know what goes on. And I think it would be detrimental. Your number one job is to educate. Your number two job is to keep our kids safe. No other single role in this school is 100% dedicated to keeping our kids safe. Only the SRO is.
Thank you.
Please don't even consider cutting this job. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments tonight. Do we have another person here that wanted to speak? I'll ask again just after a little bit later. Mr. Dunn, do we have people that are awaiting speaking over my shoulder here from our remote participants?
I do have people with hands up, but I do have a question. I was slipped a note that CHS students are in the, you said waiting room, right? Okay, so we're good. We got everybody. I'm sorry. I'm good to go.
You're good to go?
I'm reading a little clear.
Our next, Mr. Dunn, will you please allow our next person to public comment?
Yeah. So if I go online, if I start from the very top, initials MWH, if you would please unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, and where you're from, and go ahead with your comments.
Great. Good evening. This is Melissa Heinbach, and I live in Concord at 15 Rockland Road. I have 3 children who have attended Concord Public Schools, and I currently have 1 child at Runlet and 1 at Concord High. First off, I would like to thank Madison Howard and her student cohort for starting this conversation on SROs over a year ago. I believe we should support our student leaders like Maddie and not undermine them by ignoring their input and discounting their personal experiences and recommendations. I hope the board and administration will advocate for and support your brave students who are actually fighting for the most vulnerable kids in the district. Second, and I'll be completely honest, if you had asked me a couple of years ago if I supported SROs in school, I would have said sure. But I only had a surface level understanding of SROs back then, and I didn't know any real data about their impact on school children and safety. However, I have since learned the following about SROs. And I'm going to restate some of the important information that we saw earlier in Assistant Superintendent Palley's chart, that there is a gross disparity in how Concord schools discipline students of color. The most recent United States Department of Education civil rights data shows that while Black students made up only 9% of the population at Concord High, they accounted for 20.2% of out-of-school suspensions, as well as 18.6% of referrals to law enforcement, and this was in 2017. And unfortunately, the numbers at Runlet were far worse, where Black students were 8.5% of the population, but accounted for 19.1% of out-of-school suspensions and 20.3% of referrals to law enforcement. And it's also worth noting that white students with disabilities similarly were about twice as likely as their non-disabled peers to be suspended, and that Black students with disabilities were 4 times as likely to be suspended as their white and able-bodied peers. We've been shown by the ACLU that time and time again, the data shows that students of color and students with disabilities are disproportionately referred to and arrested by police in schools. And the ACLU also found that schools with police or SROs reported 3.5 times as many arrests as schools without police. Unfortunately, across the country, students with disabilities were arrested at a rate of 2.9 times that of students without disabilities. In some states, they were 10 times as likely to be arrested than their counterparts. I know that the numbers can seem overwhelming and shocking, but I have 2 kids with disabilities, and one of my kids is a person of color, and I'm absolutely horrified that my own children at Concord High and Runlet are at higher risk of being arrested by the SRO purely because of their disabilities or because of the color of their skin. This is unacceptable, not only for my kids, but for any children in the Concord School District. So, as a former educator and as a lifelong learner open to new information, I encourage you to keep looking at the data, to keep researching this topic, and most importantly, keep listening to the students of color and students with disabilities in your own district. Because if you do, I am confident that you will vote to eliminate the SROs from our schools. And I'm going to yield the remainder of my time to my son, who is a student at Concord High.
Hello, my name is Nathan Schmitz, and I am a senior at Concord High. So there's been a lot of mention about the SRO and school safety and student safety and security. Unfortunately, the greatest threats recently in the Concord schools, especially in Concord High School, were sexual predators. I unfortunately had 2 of these sexual predators, both Howie Leung and Joshua Harwood, as teachers. This makes me personally question whether the student safety is of the highest priority, given the fact that emails were sent out to me and my parents both after the Howie Leung incident and the Joshua Harwood incident, promising that our safety was of the highest priority, and assuring our safety, even though more incidents have arose after these communications were sent out. And I also would be interested to learn how the SRO kept Concord High School and the students safe from these two child predators, given the fact that they're supposed to be the first line of defense, and yet where was that first line of defense? Thank you.
Thank you both, Ms. Heimbach and Mr. Schmitz. We appreciate your comments.
Okay.
Mr. Dunn, the next person?
Yes, next is Stephen Kidder. If you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment. Thanks.
Thank you. Howdy, everyone. Stephen, pronouns he, him. I live here in Concord on South Street. And it feels very strange to see myself on that screen and on my own screen. But as a former student and current staff member, I believe my perspective is important. So when I was at Concord High, the SRO at the time was Officer Wimpy. And if you had asked me in 2008 or before then about my thoughts on him, I had no qualms with him. It wasn't until I learned the experiences of both students of color, but also other white students, that their experience was vastly different than mine. Vastly different. That they, as opposed to feeling safe and secure, felt targeted and uncomfortable with the presence of at that time Officer Wimpy, but SROs. And it was these folks whose perspectives that I learned after the fact that really gave me a fuller picture of the actual issue at hand here, which is the notion of, are we focusing on the feelings and thoughts of one person or a group of people, or are we focusing on the true safety, equality, and protection of all students, and specifically students of color? And these experiences echo clearly with what Maddie's letter went through and went over. These have been going on for decades. And the fact that this has been left to rot and that these students are left to feel uncomfortable and not represented or not heard is a problem. So we need to ensure that all students feel safe and secure and protected and not go off the experiences of a few. So we have to step away from our own personal white experiences and taking into account the experiences of students of color and other students as well. And listen to them and what they're saying is that they do not feel protected or safe or secure with an SRO in the building. So we need to listen to them and remove the SRO. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kidder, for your comments. Appreciate it. Mr. Dunn, do we have another person waiting?
Yep. Next up, Kate Vaughn. Again, if you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment. Thanks.
Good evening. My name's Kate Vaughn. I am a Concord community member and a parent of a school-aged child. I'm here tonight to speak in support of removing the SRO from Concord High School. One of the first actions this board took in January was to reaffirm the district's stance against racism. The board voted unanimously in support of the motion. While I cannot be sure of the reasons Committee Member Weinberg made this motion, I suspect it was in large part a response to the tragic killing of countless Black people by police across our country. In 2020, recognition of our criminal justice system's injustices finally moved to the forefront. The data presented by many speakers tonight demonstrates that our school district disproportionately disciplines and refers to law enforcement Black and brown students. We know that when SROs are present in schools, they are asked to assist in disciplinary matters, which ultimately leads to an increase in referrals to law enforcement. Once students are in the criminal justice system, juvenile or otherwise, they are less likely to complete high school and more likely to ultimately end up in prison. If we are to be an anti-racist school district, we should be doing everything in our power to increase the number of students graduating from high school and decreasing the number of people incarcerated in our state. One justification provided for maintaining SROs in our schools is that it develops and improves the community's relationship with law enforcement. Our children should not be responsible for improving law enforcement's image or altering a strained relationship between the police and the community. Our students are children who have not caused the distrust in law enforcement that exists for many. If our children are to be asked to trust the police, then the police must first change their conduct. We commonly hear New Hampshire does not have a police problem, and that the systemic racism that exists in other parts of the country is not here. This is simply not true. Recently released data, which has been published in the Concord Monitor this week, shows across New Hampshire and in Concord, police disproportionately arrest Black and brown people. We should not be inviting police into our schools to repair their image when we know systemic racism exists in our police forces and is negatively impacting a significant portion of our student population's families. The vote this board took in January is nothing more than words if it refuses to take action. Our children should not be policed in schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Vaughn, for your comments.
Okay, next up, Elizabeth, if you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment. Thank you. Again, Elizabeth, I see that you look like it's unmuted.
Is able to hear me now?
There we go. Yep, go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry. Thank you. So my name is Elizabeth Donlin. I am a Concord School District alum. I graduated from CHS in 2014. I'm also here representing my family, I have 3 siblings who also went through the Concord School District. We were in CHS from 2008 to 2016. So before I begin with my personal antidote on today's topic, I just wanted to remind myself and everyone else here in today's forum who are the individuals that we're here for today. It's the students' voices, specifically the marginalized voices, that we are responsible for listening to and advocating for, despite our personal opinions and despite our best intentions. I think it's a mistake not to make any sort of decision without surveying the entire student body. So with that all being said, I want to thank you guys again for the opportunity for me to share my experience. I personally had very few interactions with the SRO who was there during my time at CHS. I've chalked this up to the understanding that I was not in any situations where disciplinary action was needed. I think what's important is that we can focus on the impact of the SRO system and not just on one single person's opinion of an individual SRO. So we saw a fine presentation discussing the intentions of the roles for the SRO, but in actuality, at least my experience was, with my lack of interaction, that the function of the SRO was to discipline and punish students. During my time and my experience, this was the general consensus of my peers. The SRO felt like a threat to stay out of trouble, rather than a resource for me or any other student to open up to if they needed support. And if I've learned anything from listening to marginalized voices, people of color, and from my own research on racism in today's society, it's that it's very important now that it's important for us to found new systems that are built on building up struggling communities and not made for reprimanding them. It's the punitive systems that are put in place that put and keep individuals in vulnerable places in today's society. So I work as an engineer, and I'm a big believer in numbers. National statistics show, as shared today, I won't repeat, that SROs are feeding our school to prison pipeline. In other words, they are keeping individuals in a vulnerable place in today's society. I can't ignore this, whether CHS is an outlier in the national data or not. And based on today's presentation, I do not think we have a complete set of data to make that comparison confidently. So That's why I'm here in support of removing the SRO officer. I actually would like to rephrase it by saying replacing the SRO officer with a presence that will benefit and support all students equally, because we cannot continue to support an outdated system that only works for some, and because we cannot continue to ignore the voices of the students in marginalized communities who are asking for change. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comments tonight.
Okay, next.
Mr. Dunn.
Yep. Next up, Reagan Bissonette. I apologize if I didn't say that correctly. Please lower your hand, state your first name, last name, and where you're from. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Reagan Bissonette. My husband, Gilles Bissonette, and I live in Concord, and are parents with a child who will be a student in the district this coming fall. While we do not support the district having school resource officers in our schools for a variety of reasons, we'd like to make 3 points regarding SROs as they relate to the mental health of our students. First, today's students are experiencing record levels of depression, anxiety, and trauma. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the suicide rate among children ages 10 to 17 increased by 70%. That's 70% between the 10-year period of 2006 to 2016. Second, approximately 72% of children in the United States will have experienced at least one major stressful event, such as witnessing violence, experiencing abuse, or experiencing the loss of a loved one before the age of 18. Third, the benefits of investing in trained mental health professionals in schools are clear. Schools with such services see improved attendance rates, better academic achievement, and higher graduation rates, as well as lowered rates of suspension, expulsion, and other disciplinary incidents. In conclusion, if the role of an SRO is truly counseling, mental health intervention, and social work, as we heard today, then this work would be best served not by a police officer in our schools, but rather by trained counselors and social workers to support our students. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your public service.
Thank you, Ms. Bissonette.
Next up, Mary Rose, if you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from.
Hi, my name is Mary Rose Manena. I am a senior at Concord High, and I live in Concord as well. So today, I am in support of keeping the SRO because I do not speak for all my peers at Concord High, but as a Black female at Concord High, in the past 4 years, even though it has been cut off due to COVID, I have not seen or felt that there are instances where I've had to question the SRO at our school. In fact, since we live in a world where the reality is there are more issues such as school shootings, mental health, violence, and sexual abuse, etc., having an SRO there has made me feel more comfortable, knowing that there's an easy resource to obtain just by the main office. And with that, being a student there 5 days a week and having to be there for 7 hours a day and being an active member in our school and in our community, I feel that an SRO is viable to our day-to-day lives. Even though we have not had a school shooting necessarily, if there were to be one, I would have faith that our SRO would act accordingly. And with that, I do not believe that removing him would necessarily solve our issue. There are ways to improve our problem because we all know that the Concord School District is not necessarily perfect, but there are ways to improve rather than just remove. And with that, I'd like to thank you guys for listening to my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Manina, for your contribution this evening.
Okay, next up, Ed Taylor. Please unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from. Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here with all of you. My name is Ed Taylor, and I work for the ACLU New Hampshire, and that's what I'm speaking on behalf of tonight. The American Civil Liberties Union of New Hampshire stands in solidarity with Concord community members in urging their school district to remove its SRO position and instead to prioritize scarce resources on students' behavioral health. Students today are facing an unprecedented pandemic impacting how they learn, the resources their schools have, and their families' physical and financial well-being. They are experiencing record levels of depression and anxiety and trauma, all exacerbated by COVID-19 and its aftermath. What our students need are behavioral health services. What they do not need is an SRO who is not trained in mental health or social work, but instead trained to arrest, detain, and incapacitate. Schools are facing budget shortcuts and will need to cut funds from somewhere. The ACLU of New Hampshire urges the Concord School District to eliminate its SRO position and instead to prioritize its scarce resources on services for students. New Hampshire disproportionately arrests and incarcerates people of color, and our schools disproportionately subject students of color to exclusionary discipline. As our state grapples with systematic racism and strives to advance racial justice, we must apply these efforts to our schools. Students deserve to be supported. If student behavior warrants discipline, let it be decided and handled by teachers and school administrators. Having law enforcement in our schools does not enhance learning. Instead, it risks impeding the learning of students, particularly students of color. The ACLU of New Hampshire implores the Concord School District to seize this opportunity to prioritize learning and student well-being while removing its SRO position. Thank you all for your time and service.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor, for your comments this evening.
Okay, next up, Ms. Kashi, if you could please unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment.
Okay, hi. So my name is Samaya Kashi or Somaya Kashi. I live on 31 Auburn Street, and I wear a lot of different hats here in Concord. I'm a teacher, I am a parent, and I'm also a person of color. So my perspective is slightly different than perhaps many of you, or maybe it is, I don't know. But so I just want to mention a few things. I'm a teacher at Runlet Middle School, and we do not have an SRO. We have a lot of the same issues, maybe not quite as big, but I do believe that we have a lot of very similar problems, and yet we do not feel the need to have an SRO. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. Two, I'm sure the person we have today for SRO is wonderful. I've never met him, never had the pleasure, but I do want to say that we're at the mercy of whoever has the job. So while he might be great, in 2 years we might have somebody else, and we're at the mercy of whoever is in that position. Three, the statistics have been pretty clear nationally. They have not lowered the crime rates in schools. They really haven't done what they were intended for. And so that's another point. According to the list that was given this at the beginning of this meeting, that's a lot of rules for one human being to play. My gosh, I thought teachers had it bad, but oh my gosh, I mean, he has a lot to have to do, and I can't imagine that anyone can do all of that and do it well. So I would like to see that money funded towards better mental health and replacing it towards more social emotional learning. I, as a teacher, would love nothing more than to learn to do a better job, because if anything, we're the first people there with our students. We're the ones alone in the classroom with 20 plus students. So while it may take him minutes to get to us, we're there present in the classroom. So if anything, I would like the money to go towards my training rather than one person to deal with how many students are at the high school. So anyhow, I just think the whole system is a part of a punitive, national-wide punitive system, and I know a few of you have said that already. And again, I'm going to reiterate that I think that the focus should be on more of the mental health and social emotional learning. And that's it. And also, I just do want to say that as a person of color, if I saw a police officer walking around the building, I personally would feel scared. I would. So my perspective is not the same as another person in the same building who's white. It's not. It is what I would feel uncomfortable. I would feel scared, even though I've done nothing. But that's just because of my life experience. So I imagine those students are feeling pretty nervous and scared whenever they're walking into the school to see a police officer greet them at the door. So anyhow, that's my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kashi, for your comments this evening. Mr. Dunn?
Yep. All right. Let's see. Okay. Nadia Alano Yen, if you could please unmute yourself, state your full name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment. Thank you.
It's Lydia, actually.
Okay, Lydia, thank you. Sorry about that.
I'm from Concord, New Hampshire. I'm a Concord High alum, and I'm also the leader of Change for Concord. So in January, Change for Concord had a week of action centered around the Concord School District. We are a diverse group of young adults working to improve the quality of life for young people in the community. Our group members are tied to the Concord School District in one way or another, so naturally, we care a lot about it. One of the events during the week of action was a collective letter writing about the SRO position and students' mental health. We sent the school officials the letter last week and have circulated it with community members to raise awareness, but maybe not everyone read the letter, so I'm just going to read a couple points from it. In the 7 years from 2011 to 2017, 282 students were referred to law enforcement and 142 were arrested. These numbers clearly represent a problem within the school district. The preferred idea that the SRO helps the kids to see police officers as human beings and not just as a kind of imperial threat simply does not apply to all students in Concord and should not be used as a continued justification for the presence of an SRO. The touted triad role of SROs in New Hampshire schools also is insufficient justification for keeping an armed police officer in our schools. Officers are meant to serve as law enforcers and educators and informal counselors. This is a quote about the school resource officer. First, we disagree that law enforcement officers armed with weapons and the authority to arrest belong in schools. Second, school resource officers are neither competent educators nor counselors. As we understand it, they only received a 5-day course and an annual workshop to supplement their standard police training. This is plainly insufficient training for any school employee whose primary role is either educating or counseling, let alone a staff member who is being asked to perform both duties. For all these reasons, we feel that the school could better spend the money for the SRO program elsewhere. In particular, additional mental health and counseling resources, including professionals who reflect the identities of the student and community population, would make the school safer and improve the quality of lives of students. In a recent poll of students, teachers, and community members, mostly parents, Concord parents and community members, conducted by Change for Concord, 63% of respondents were concerned about racial discrimination by police officers, and 93% were worried about students' mental health. We can do better to support our students' health and decrease risk to our students of color if we reallocate funds from the SRO program. I also want to mention an article that was written this summer about the school resource officer position. And I just found out this fact recently, that the Concord Teachers Union in January requested, this article was written over the summer, so not this past January. The Concord Teachers Union requested via a letter to the school board that the administration increase the number of school resource officers in the district and place one in every school to help handle physical and verbal violence teachers say they have been receiving from students. And the next important point that everyone should listen to, the violence mostly in the preschool to elementary school levels was making teachers feel unsafe at work. So that kind of, I'm asking the questions, why are teachers and staff members afraid of preschoolers and elementary school kids? Why would you want a school resource officer in a preschool or elementary school out of fear, and you have more power than these students? What's happening to the students that they're acting out aggressively, and what's in place for students who are having difficulties? Because these problems don't happen out of nowhere, and having a school resource officer put in place as a reaction to these problems, it won't help. Don't criminalize students for having problems, for in the development age. Don't criminalize them, because that's exactly what you're doing if you put another school resource officers in our Concord schools. So think about this this article, and I can provide it, but you can find it on the Concord Monitor too. And that's all.
Thank you, Ms. Yen, for your comments this evening. We appreciate them.
Okay, next up, Barry, if you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment.
Hello, my name is Barry Lawrence. I live here in Concord. I have one child that's currently in the Concord School District, and I have one child that graduated from the Concord School District. I also have one other child who was in the Concord School District, and then we sent him to Parker. One of the interesting things is that the current SRO at Concord High School, I actually knew from when that person was a principal at Parker Education. And so I wanted to say, just to start off, that he was extremely helpful to my child when he was a principal. He was actually exceptional person, an exceptional individual. Now, just so you understand, I am African American. My father was actually a police officer in another country. My closest friends are actually police officers. And at the same time, every time I go to work, I'm not a police officer, but when I wear my jacket, my suit, on my lapel, I wear a pin that says Black Lives Matter. So I say that just to kind of give an impression of who I am. Like I said, I live here in Concord, and I think the only issue that I see going on here is that this idea of getting rid of the SRO is kind of a low-hanging fruit. The current SRO, I've asked my son who's in the school, I said, before I got on here, I said, let me know, have you ever had any type of problem with the current SRO? And he said, no, I actually like him. I asked him, how about your friends? Have your friends had a problem with him? And he also said, no, they actually kind of like our current SRO. So I don't think the issue is really so much the SRO that we have now. I think there was one other person said was, well, who's the SRO that we're going to have after the current one? But at the same time, let's say we get rid of the SRO. What does that mean? The issue of racism and the fact that there are 40%, if I understood the chart correctly, of the arrests at Concord are black students. That is the issue of racism, which is a slow burn. You know, so we replace the SRO, we get rid of that position, but we expose the kids to maybe racist teachers or racist coaches or counselors, racist cafeteria workers. It's a slow burn, the experience of racism in America, and I think that there's a lot of white people that just don't understand that. It happens with people that consider themselves to be great, progressive people. It still happens with them. And it eventually tears away at them. I've had my kids tell me that teachers have said racist things to them. I've had my teachers say racist things to my wife. If you remember there was a time, I guess it was about 2 or 3 years ago, where someone from the Department of Education, a spokesperson, made a comment that really reeked of racism about people coming up to the Concord or to New Hampshire from these other states and bringing all their problems and issues with them. So I say that just to make it very clear that this is a slow burn, and the idea of getting rid of the SRO, which I guess I'm somewhat indifferent to. I want to keep this SRO, but I am concerned about who will be the next SRO. And I just want to be very clear that that is the issue. We've picked the low-hanging fruit because we can get rid of this current SRO and you'll still have all the same issues. You'll still see, you'll rather than being confronted in the school, well, they'll just arrest them on the street. That'll be the difference. And so I think that the school district really needs to look a lot harder at the concept of racism and low expectations and everything else that comes along that destroys the lives of young, Black, Hispanic, Asian, and white kids, and get honest, real honest about what's actually going on here. Because we can get rid of an SRO and we're going to have the same problems until people really decide they're going to really make a difference and change. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence, for your comments this evening. We appreciate them. Mr. Dunn.
Next up, Leah Plunkett, if you could unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Leah Plunkett, and I live here in Concord with my husband and my 2 young kids. I'm trained as an attorney, and I am a former legal aid lawyer. I founded the Youth Law Project at New Hampshire Legal Assistance over a decade ago. I'm speaking solely in my personal capacity, not for my prior employer, but to share that as an attorney at the Youth Law Project, I represented youth and teenage clients, many of whom were getting into trouble with the law that originated at school. My clients, almost to a person, had underlying mental health issues that were either not fully diagnosed, or if they were diagnosed, were not being properly treated with IEPs or 504 plans or other resources. My clients would engage in disturbing behavior at school, which, understanding that there are safety concerns and the need to protect everybody, still would result in over-criminalizing their normal misbehavior or their misbehavior that was the result of underlying mental health and other related issues. I watched time and again as my clients were taken into legal custody and brought into the juvenile justice system for incidents that originated at school. Usually, not always, but usually, my clients had this experience through the intervention of a SRO, and I practiced across the state, so I'm speaking broadly of New Hampshire now. And the SRO would arrest the client and bring them into the juvenile justice system, after which point, despite interventions that were often well-meaning, my clients had more trouble than they would have had getting the resources that they deserved under the law and that they truly needed to address their underlying mental health and other challenges. And so in my experience as an attorney, I saw firsthand and was an advocate for children who were brought into the school to prison pipeline by having a school resource officer on campus. So I'm here to speak in support of shifting resources from a SRO and into mental health and other services to support children and teens who are struggling, rather than to provide a door into the school and present pipeline, which does disproportionately impact students of color, students with disabilities. And hi, sorry, that is my dog who was whining at me. So I will wrap up. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments this evening, Ms. Plunkett. We appreciate them.
Great, thank you. Raul I apologize. Karuma? I apologize if I mispronounced your name, but
no,
go ahead.
It's Kahura.
Kahura. Did I get that right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm a student of color here, and I actually just happened to be on YouTube, and I caught a glimpse of this video, and I wanted to join in on the conversation. I agree with, I think his name was Barry, that the position of the SRO isn't what we should really be focusing on. While it, at least for me as a student, I'm really indifferent because I've never had an interaction with the current SRO. And many of my friends, I mean, if we don't get into trouble, we don't really see the SRO or talk to him or interact with him. All we do is see him, walk around school, and he's, he doesn't really do anything that affects us. When we talk about, students of color and what the real problem is, I don't think the real problem is the SRO position. I think, like that guy Barry said, I think there's racist teachers. There could be racist teachers. There's racist staff members, and that could also be a problem. And the issue that he was talking about of racism being a slow burn of, especially criminalizing students. I have a lot of experience of this as a new American. When I came here, I went into elementary school, and anything I did, I was kind of looked at as being aggressive or doing something, or whatever I did would be kind of like criminalized, and I would have to go to the principal's office. They would suspend me, or they would say I was, threatening somebody for things that I've seen my friends do. And especially coming here and adjusting to a new culture, it kind of had an effect on my not mental health, but like I did have some things that I hadn't dealt with, like coming here and moving away from my family. And I don't know who did it, but somebody did recommend my mom bring me to Riverbend and go through my problems. And that really, because I had anger issues, and that really helped me tremendously. And I think that's what we should be talking about, not what we do to students after they do something. We should be looking at why are they doing these things. For me, I was doing these things because I had anger issues from unresolved problems, especially moving to a new country as a kid. And I think many of my friends also have that problem, but they didn't get the same care I did. I was referred to, Riverbend. I went there and I dealt with my problems, and, now I can say that, I'm better. I'm off better, and I think that is what should be happening in the Concord school system. That is what should be happening to our students. We shouldn't just be, okay, you did something, now you get a punishment. We should be looking at why are these students doing these things. If we really are talking about helping new Americans, that is what we should be looking at. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kahura. Thank you for your comments this evening. We appreciate them.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Amaya Simmons, if I pronounced that right. Please go ahead and unmute yourself.
Hello, yes, you did.
Excellent. Go ahead. Thank you.
Can you hear me well? Sorry if there's any background noise or anything about my place of work. My name is Amaya Simmons. I'm a student at Concord High School, and I felt that it is important for me to speak on behalf of not only my student body, but of in the Concord community as a whole. I just want to thank the school board tonight for providing statistics that pertain to our own Concord High School community, not others surrounding or other states within the United States. I want others to also take a step back and recognize that emotions do happen to cloud judgment, unfortunately. We all are emotional human beings, and I understand that with the racial climate and things that are happening in this world, a lot can give some bias and have people have their preconceived notions or judgment. But I feel like it is important to recognize that the school resource officer has helped students, and I can speak on behalf that I am a female of color, and I've never come into a issue with the school resource officer. I've actually found him helpful. I found him to allow me to feel more safe within my own school community, and I've just found him as a way to just allow me to have a more peaceful mindset in the sense that someone will be there in the case of an emergency situation. I do want to say that I think, I don't remember who it was earlier, but for commenting on how we can train the school resource officer in a way that can help the students more in the sense of mental health and self-harm and things of that sort. I definitely agree. I think that we could put more effort into that instead of completely taking the position away. As we have seen, he has been helpful to students, teachers, and others. And that is all I really want to say. I think that as a student, he is important to our school, and he should remain in a position. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons, for your comments this evening. We appreciate them.
Okay, next up, Laura Orland. Please go ahead and unmute yourself. First name, last name, where you're from. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lauren Orland. I'm a Concord resident. I have a son who attends Concord High School, and I'm also employed at Concord High School. This is my 15th year at Concord High School. I've been a special education teacher for 14 of those years, and this year I'm working as a school counselor. I have to say that there have been 3 resource officers who have served at Concord High School while I have been here. And each of them has been a resource for the students that I've worked with. I have been in positions where students have been found to have illegal substances and have been brought in for discipline. The resource officer has been able to come in and talk with the student, explain options, make recommendations that help de-escalate the situation. I have seen kids who have legal situations that they don't understand who will go to the resource officers and ask for clarification. And I have seen students maintain relationships with resource officers and ultimately come to see them as role models who they seek out and ask for support. They have overall been an incredibly positive experience for the students that I work with, and have been really collaborative in their work with me in both of these roles. I can't say how much I value their presence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Orland, for your comments this evening, and we appreciate your participating.
Thank you.
Okay, next up, Madison, if you could please unmute yourself, state your first name, last name, where you're from, and go ahead and make your comment.
All right. Hi, my name is Madison Howard. I am a senior at Concord High School, and today I would like to speak in favor of replacing Concord High School's SRO program with additional mental health resources. So as we've heard tonight, there are 2 main justifications for having a school resource officer in the school: safety and relationship building. So with regards to student and staff safety, as we saw in the previous presentation, the majority of interactions people have with law enforcement at Concord High School, the majority of these interactions did not have to do with violent crimes, but with drug, alcohol, or tobacco infractions. Nationally, there is no evidence that suggests the presence of SROs reduces crime or prevents school shooting. While statewide, SROs are trained in juvenile interactions and justice, this training is only 5 days long. Personally, I can say that I feel much less safe knowing that there is a deadly weapon within the school, an environment that is supposed to be a place of learning and growth, not punitive justice. Now, with regards to relationship building, the second reason behind having SROs at Concord High. Data from the University of Tennessee shows that many students, especially students of color, actually feel less safe with an SRO in the building. And again, in my personal experience, I have never had a conversation, nor have any of my peers who I've spoken to about this issue had a conversation with any of our SROs. And I've been at Concord for about 4 years. Of course, the experience of myself and my peers may not represent the experiences of the entire student body, but I felt that was important to bring up. I don't purport that removing our SRO alone will solve all or even any of our problems. However, when there are so many other evidence-backed programs that can be used to support our students, it seems foolish to spend our district's limited resources on a program that has little to no evidence to support its claims that the SRO program promotes student safety or community building. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Howard, for your comments this evening and your contributions.
Hey, Jim, I do have someone in the audience that came up and would like to make a comment. Just in case there's nobody else.
There's nobody else.
Online.
I'm sorry, I can't see behind me. So
that's right. Yeah, there's nobody else online. But
well, thank you, Mr. Dunn. Once again, anyone in the audience that would like to make a comment, now's a good time. Please just state your name and your town.
Hi, my name is Tina Philibot. I live in Concord here. I'm a Concord resident, a parent, and a teacher here in New Hampshire at a public high school. So I'm the mother of the student who made the petition to remove SROs, and I'd be lying if I said that after she published that petition that I still felt she was safe in the presence of police. Recently, media has been covering an uptick in violence against Asian Americans. I share this with you to help kind of understand where I'm coming from. Yeah. I worry about my daughter's safety. I worry that someone is going to I worry that someone is going to put their hands on her body and assault her because of her skin, because of her eyes. I worry that someone might do the same to me. If you're not Asian, you cannot fully understand the breadth of living with the fear of violence and with the racial trauma that is triggered every time I hear of this violence. You can't, but I'm going to ask you to try. I need you to know that racial trauma triggers a deep stress response. When I tell you that folks come to me and tell me that my English is so good, how long have you been in my country? When I tell you that people have told my daughter that her hands are so cute and small that they'd be perfect for working in sweatshops, I'm asking you to try to understand how painful that is. Coupled with an uptick in violence against Asian people, I live in constant, albeit repressed, terror. Sit with that trauma for a moment. I don't know what it feels like to be a mother of a young black boy. I see the news, I saw that knee, I have heard the firsthand racial trauma of my black and brown students, of my black and brown friends. I do understand what racial trauma feels like in my bones and in my blood. And as a teacher, a friend, and a human being, I have a responsibility to try to understand how psychologically damaging the presence of a police officer can be for people of color. And I have an obligation to act when I can. When folks come to you and say that though the intent of police officers is to be a resource, the impact of police brutality is terrifying. To go into a space that you are legally obligated to attend and have to experience the deep, visceral pain of racial trauma due to a police presence, that's not a good space from which to learn. Racial trauma is not politics for people of color. It is personal. It is in our bones, our blood, our skin. I'm asking you to redirect the $88,000 earmarked for the student resource officer and invest it in a student resource center. Invest it in a robust program with student support groups and social workers and counselors and curriculum, and nurture a space where all kids feel safe, seen, and valued. And lastly, if you're concerned that more students of color aren't providing testimony today, know it's because they have legitimate fears for their safety. I heard a data point, something like 75% of students want that SRO. Do the voices of the 25% matter? You have the opportunity to uplift the voices of those who have been historically marginalized by the decision you're about to make. Let redirecting the current SRO funds be the start. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Philbrook, for your comments this evening.
Maureen Adams again. I just want to say, I think it's good that we're having this discussion. I think, again, nationally, it's a discussion that needs to happen. But I also want to say we need to be really careful about removing positions because of racism or accusations of racism or national statistics, and we're plucking a position from our school potentially, because that sets a precedent for any position out there, anyone. Oh, well, nationally, principals are racist, and I'm not belittling it, but I'm just saying we need to be very careful, because if we put more money into mental health or we put more money into resource centers, which is not a bad idea, but what are we going to do about the physical safety of our kids? You're never going to have 1,600 kids feel safe. I think this is an opportunity to educate everybody, to maybe use this position in a dynamic way, and we can be at the leading edge of maybe redesigning a resource officer position. But I definitely don't feel comfortable as a parent not having an officer like this in the school. I don't care if he wears plain clothes. Maybe that would help some people. I don't know. I've been in cities overseas because of the threat of danger, police in full fatigues with automatic rifles standing right next to me. You know what? I didn't feel comfortable with them, but I felt safe. I did. I'm not a person of color, but I also want to tell you, how many of you know how many black kids in this school call each other NIGGA? They call my kids that. They call teachers that. So keep that in mind, because it's real.
Can I ask you to focus?
It happens. So I just want to say we need to be really careful with making decisions about plucking positions because of racism, because I'm fed up with that part of it. Happens all the time. So I want my kids safe. I want them educated, number one, and I've been begging for that. But I want them safe. So if we pull positions because of racism, there's a lot of racism out there. I agree. But we're setting a precedent to target any position out there. And I don't think that's the answer. I think education is the answer on many levels. Thank you very much.
To your comments. Excuse me. You're able to speak as a student on the board. You may speak from here. Yes. Mr. Dunn, Janita would like to speak, please.
Sure. Good.
Hello. My name is Janita. I'm a junior at Concord High School. I'm a person of color. I'm also adopted. Personally, in my school, obviously, I know our officer. I haven't personally had a connection with him, and I know a lot of students haven't had a connection with him. A lot of students leave Concord High never having a connection or knowing him. I think it's really important. I do think that it's important that we realize that it's not only a matter of people of color feeling uncomfortable, and it's also a matter of how can we help students, have the best opportunities given to them. I know that Ms. Kashi stated that our resource officer does have a lot of responsibilities. How is one person supposed to carry out all those responsibilities? I think it would be really beneficial to have other social and emotional learning opportunities put in place. Trauma, I have experienced trauma, and I don't think that children should be given to, especially at a younger age, a police officer to deal with the trauma. When you deal with trauma, you have to be nurtured and talked to and heard, and yeah, he might offer us that, and in no way do I want to be a part of taking away a man's job. I am very empathetic to people. I would hate for him to suffer under our placements, but I do think it's really important that we realize that there are people being marginalized and racially profiled during these times. And I know that our previous school officer, he was definitely, it was a little difficult with him. I do know that there were incidents. I do know that our current officer has had that opportunity to be an educator. So it's easier for him to, I guess in a way, connect with students. But I do think that it's really important to, I don't know, I sympathize with everyone, but I do believe that putting in social and emotional learning opportunities would be the best outcome. And I think it would help our school connect more possibly, because I do know that right now we still don't really have a connection with the police officer. I know that I feel sometimes weird about walking past that office. I tend to put my head down when I see an officer because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know. It's just my uncomfort. So, yeah.
Thank you, Janine. Do we have anyone else in the audience that would like to make a public comment? Is there anyone else that is remote that would like to make a public comment this evening? And Jack, please help me if I can't see.
Yep. So far, there's no hands raised.
Hi, I would like to, except I have no idea how to raise my hand on Zoom, and my daughter is not sitting here helping me at the moment.
That's absolutely fine. You may make a comment. Please just state your name and where you're from, and we appreciate your comment.
Okay, thank you. My daughter is horrified that I'm speaking, so she just left the room. This is Rebecca McHugh. I'm logged in. My daughter and I were logged in together. So I was just going to say that I have the perspective of working in a district that's primarily made up of students of color and being a teacher there, where there is an SRO in my building, and being a parent of 2 kids here in Concord. One who really enjoys the SRO at the high school, as do I as her mom, feeling like it's super helpful to have an objective perspective of someone who is not perhaps loyal to the school district in the sense that they'll turn a blind eye to wrongdoing in the case of sexual predators or the like. It's comforting as a parent. But more, I wanted to speak as a teacher who sees the positive of the SRO for my students, where in my school, it's about 70% students of color and students who come from all over the world. And we also have a school social worker, and we have 3 guidance counselors, and we have a family liaison. We have a lot of mental health positions and an SRO, but the SRO serves a role of connecting kids, I guess without giving away any student identifiable information, there's a lot of students who have a lot of trauma and who don't feel comfortable talking to the white female social workers and family resource counselors. They feel comfortable talking to the male resource officer, who then much more efficiently than the school social workers making calls to DCYF and getting nowhere, takes action and gets safety things in place for a lot of these kids. So I have seen, and I'm not talking about national statistics or other parts of the country. I'm just talking about the communities of Manchester and Concord, and I've seen the positive benefits of SROs in kids' physical safety, food insecurity, mental health, connecting them with sport, with lots of things that keep them in better positions than they would otherwise be in. And I don't want to say too much. I don't want to say anything that could be identifiable. And my daughter hasn't had tons of contact with the SRO at Concord High School, but she has mentioned that person more than a few times in the sense that she likes knowing that he's there. My daughter, who is at Runlet, has said many times that she doesn't feel like Runlet is a super safe place, and it would be nice to feel like there were someone keeping an eye on things. I can empathize with students who feel uncomfortable, seeing a police officer because maybe they've had some negative experiences. But as many of the other speakers said tonight, I don't think that we can then scapegoat an SRO and say, well, there are issues of systemic racism that exist in the world, so let's remove an SRO and that will make things better. So anyway, I just wanted to offer my 2 cents of feeling like an SRO is really positive. And if you'd asked me this 10 years ago, before one existed in my place of work, I would have probably thought, I don't think that's necessary. That seems a bit much. And day to day, seeing how the role he serves and all the things he does that have nothing to do with being a police officer, at least in the traditional sense, I think that in Concord, we need to maybe widen our horizon and think about the purposes that the SROs can serve and not maybe, I don't know, not be politicizing it quite so much and see it as a benefit that it can be. So that's it.
Thank you very much, Ms. McHugh, for your comments this evening.
Thanks.
Okay, I do not see anybody with their hand raised. Other than that, I can't determine if there is anybody else if their hands aren't raised.
Okay, not seeing any other people wanting to make a comment. I will ask anyone here to raise their hand if they want to come down and make a comment if you haven't had the opportunity to. Then I would like to thank everyone who participated tonight and took the time to express their views and opinions. No one of us can speak for the entire board, but I want to thank everyone. It's a difficult, this is a decision that's important, one that we have worked on, and we really appreciate the input from our community. So thank you. Does anyone else on the board have anything they would like to say at this time, or comments? Yes, Ms. Walsh.
I just think that for the community and for the board, it would be helpful to get sort of a comprehensive summary of the mental health resources and services at the high school. Because this is an important decision. I don't know if I see it as an either-or decision, and I think we need to do an evaluation of the mental health supports. I'm concerned that we're hearing from students that they don't feel like they have the mental health support they need at the high school, and I think that need is only going to grow when students return to schools, hopefully soon. So that would be really helpful, I think.
Superintendent, can you provide us with that information in the near future? Thank you very much. Ms. Higgins.
I'm going to echo Pam a little bit. I don't think it should be either or as well. But the comment that struck me tonight was if it's about us, not without us. I think it was something like that. And about really understanding where our students, how our students feel. We had equal numbers of students here tonight representing each side of this issue. And what that says to me is the 8 or 10 students we heard from cannot represent all of our district. And so I would love for there to be a mechanism for students to share their thoughts. That the one little survey there with the 74 students was phenomenal. So if she can do it, we can do it. And I also think, along with teachers, the parent voices are important as well. So I know that that's sort of in plan, but if I had to summarize tonight, not enough information in my head right now to make a decision that I feel would be a good one for anybody.
Any other board comments? Ms. Smith, feel free to contribute if you'd like to, or ask a question if you'd like to. And Mr. Dunn, if...
It's me. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
I know I've been pretty quiet. I've just been trying to sort of listen tonight and really sort of take in what everybody has bravely put out there tonight. So I just want to say thanks to everybody who has contributed, just trying to listen and learn the best that I can.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Mr. Weiner, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Ms. Cannon.
I seem to make controversial statements, but maybe that's my life. I have a background in science, and I want people to be very careful about the conclusions they draw from the data that has been presented. I think that a very simplistic line has been drawn from data point to data point when it is an incredibly complex issue. Racism is a very, very complex issue, and I don't think that you can take population statistics and necessarily extrapolate to end result statistics without significant additional data points along the way that we don't have. So I just want to caution people about the data that's been presented and the data that we don't have.
Thank you, Ms. Cannon. Mr. Weinberg.
I was wondering if the administration could answer. Someone mentioned tonight about the DARE program being contingent on the decision tonight. I was curious why that is.
Jonathan, I just recently heard that the member of the staff over at Krista McAuliffe was interested in the DARE program. I know that the DARE program was up and running in Concord many years ago, had stopped, again, based on research and evidence programs. So that's being looked at right now. I don't know about the statement that Mr. Pelletier referred to about it was contingent on tonight. That was news to me. Matter of fact, I made note of that so I could follow up on it tomorrow. But they did have it. It stopped, and there was much discussion around whether the DARE program is an evidence-based program. Not that Mr. Pelletier's comments weren't, very positive and applicable to the kids in 5th grade at Krista McAuliffe, but we're looking at it.
Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Hastings.
I could be mistaken, but I thought that we were going to have representation from the police department here tonight.
We asked that, but that they chose not to attend. Okay. And I think that was an opportunity for the people to speak and not, have a police officer here and all of that. I mean, this, it's what we heard tonight, isn't it? And so they felt that they chose not to be here. And it's not because they're not interested in the program and the work. That's no one should draw that conclusion. I think they wanted everyone who attended, both in person as well on screen, not to feel any pressure or stress related to having the officers here.
But doesn't that sort of speak to the
I suppose it does, but these are adults, and these are kids sitting here. I can't speak for the chief.
I'm saying that if adults don't feel comfortable speaking tonight in the presence of a police officer, how would students feel learning in the presence of a police officer? I think that's something to consider.
I don't know why, other than the fact that they didn't feel that it was appropriate for them to be here.
Okay.
So I'll have to leave it up to that point, because I don't have any other reason, and your point is well taken.
Thank you.
Are there any other board members that have any questions or comments? Yes, Mr. Parker.
That being said, it might be nice for the board to hear from the police department at some point without it being a public hearing, just as we would with any of our programs. We often have their directors come and speak to us.
You know, it's been my experience in past positions that often they came into a board meeting or an instructional committee meeting and presented their position on things. So I've had that experience where they came in. Sometimes when they were talking specifics, they actually went into non-public because they were talking about safety and security, because you don't want to do that in public, and I mean safety and security of a building. But then other times they've been in public hearings and spoke about their work in the community as well as in the schools. So we can arrange that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Any other questions, comments? Mr. Weinberg.
Addressing a comment about kind of counsel and Gina, can you hear me better? Cool, sorry.
Yeah.
Regarding legal counsel, and in a scenario, if a student is asked to write a witness statement, what is the procedure? Is a parent always called beforehand? What in the case, so I'm just kind of curious about that. If an incident occurs where a student would have to write a witness statement and is asked by the SRO, what goes through?
Okay, so you're saying specifically if it's a situation involving the SRO, where it was referred to the SRO and he's taking statements from students. So if an act or something occurs at school with a student, it goes through the assistant principal in the Commons first. Usually work in tandem with the student's counselor. Parents are called, notified of the situation. We have a discussion with them and inform them of the severity and that it is something we have to report. And that the SRO may be speaking with their child. We encourage them to come in. Most parents come in and sit with the student and the SRO at the time of that interview and when that statement's taken. In some cases, some parents, they're comfortable with the child sitting down with their counselor and an SRO, or with myself as their assistant principal in the SRO, and having that conversation. But before it even gets to the SRO, the conversation has occurred at the Commons level with the AP, counselor, and the parent. Does that answer the question?
Yes, okay. And that happens every time?
Every time I've done it, that's how it's worked, and that is the common practice across the 3 Commons here at Concord. Now, I've only been here a year and almost 2 years, but that has been my practice even prior to coming here at Pembroke Academy, where I was an AP for 9 years prior.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. Any other comments? Anyone who did not get to speak? All right. Without any further, we certainly, first of all, I'd like to once again thank everyone who testified tonight and who came out to this public meeting, either virtually or in person, to express their opinions and comments to the board. We greatly appreciate the input. Thank you, Superintendent, for gathering all of the comments that were made via email to us. We certainly have a fair amount to read. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn, since we have no other business.
So moved.
Okay, moved by Ms. Higgins. Is there a second? Someone will second.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Weinberg. All right. Motion is to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions. We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.